Insert Disc 2.
RetroGaming Radio, 2006. A different hobby than sitting with your ass strapped up to Xbox Live. God, I love Generation Jimmy. This is retarded. Why am I reading this list? Hey, that's Pikachu. Keep it retro. Hello, folks, and welcome to the September 2006 edition of Retro Gaming Radio. This is Shane R. Monroe, your host. Welcome to the program. Well, we do have an exciting show for you this month, actually before the end of the month, if you could believe it. This month, we're going to take a new look at the video game crash, both the old one and potentially the next one. Could a crash be averted? We'll talk about it this month. Also, we have a brand new interview with the laserdisc emulator Daphne. Matt Ownby, the brainchild, project coordinator, ultimate guru of Daphne, comes in and sits down with us, talks about Daphne's past, present, and future. And there's a lot of exciting developments in there. I think you're going to find that exciting. We also have our new regular segment on the hardware flashback, actually, where we have a guest speaker come in and tell you a little something about hardware collecting, all sorts of good stuff. We also have another new possible segment I'm working with Arcade Nut, a.k.a. Brien King of arcaderestoration.com. He's going to come in and tell us a little bit about arcade restoration, and hopefully if you have questions, we'll be able to bring Brien back on the show to answer them for you. We also have an update, of course, on the Year 7 DVD. Where's it at? How much is it going to cost? When can you get it? Finally, we're going to give you our giant Bits and Bytes segment. This time we got some real gems in here, as always. All of this and much more on this month's edition of Retro Gaming Radio. This month's editorial commentary may come as a huge shock to a lot of you who've been longtime listeners of the show. For many years, I'd say probably a better portion of a half a decade, myself and many others, after, of course, I talked about it, have discussed the possible crash of video gaming. For those of you who weren't around or don't remember too much about the video game crash that occurred in the early 80s, you may want to go and pick up some literature before continuing the show to better understand what really caused the crash and what life was like before and after the video game crash of the early 80s, to better understand where I'm coming from. I've been chanting that we are on our way to a video game crash. I've been talking about it a lot. I've ran at least 2 or 3 different editorial commentary segments on it. I've talked about it in Bits and Bytes. I've mentioned it on the forums that I believed that a video game crash was imminent. Now, would it be a complete slaughterhouse like it was in the early 80s? No. But it was going to get to the point to where video gaming became yet again a confusing, insignificant market, and people were going to turn to some different medium of entertainment. Something like the PC, or the computer, which is what happened to the video game crash. Had the crash lasted longer, had there been a longer downtime between the crash and when it was reinvigorated by the NES, I think computer gaming and computer entertainment would have been completely different. For example, if there were no consoles, if the NES did not provide a method of gaming, where would people have gone? Entertainment-style computers, Commodore 64, Atari 800, which would have led them not to the IBM PC, not to the Mac. They would have been led to entertainment-style computers. Again, the next generation, the Amiga, the Atari ST, Apple IIgs. These products would have grown. The growth would have been astronomical, and there would have been no reason to own a console. Not when you could do your spreadsheet work as well as play an arcade purg version of Arkanoid. That being said, the only thing that really stopped computing from becoming the main vassal of gaming, in my humble opinion, is the fact that Nintendo came along with the NES and brought console gaming back to the masses. Now let's talk about that for a minute because it's important to what I've got to say. In the early days of video gaming, there was the arcade. Now, if you watch period pieces of the time, look at like Tron, look at War Games, look at all of the other, during the heyday of video game movies. And for those of you who were actually alive and cognizant back then, you remember that arcades were not a hangout of the whelps. I mean, you go to an arcade now, you maybe see one adult, and that his name is Attendant, right? You see a lot of kids. There's a lot of redemption machines. There's a lot of kiddie stuff there. Now, the spider stomps and whatever. Occasionally, you'll go to some really huge arcade like Castles and Coasters here in Phoenix, and you'll see the old dudes like myself playing pinball or air hockey or strapped to the Ultracade machine, or they're up on the second floor playing Robotron or Gorf or Tron. In any event, what I'm saying is in the early days of the video arcade, it was not a limited audience to children. Adults were seen. For crying out loud, half of Japan took the day off to play Space Invaders, man. The workforce, the actual currency of Japan was in jeopardy. That doesn't happen when a market is driven to a niche. What happened after the crash was that Nintendo came by and saved the ass of gaming. Now, I didn't like the NES. If you listen to my old shows, you will know I am no NES fan. I was not a Super Nintendo fan. I don't care how great the specs were. I don't care about any of that crap. I did not get back into console gaming truly until the PlayStation 1. And that's only because it had Crash Team Racing, and it was the closest thing to Mario Kart I could do without actually having to buy a Nintendo 64, because I didn't like Nintendo. All right? Anybody who's known me for any length of time knows that Nintendo during the early years pissed me off, partially probably because they stopped the computer revolution, and that's where I wanted gaming to go. I wanted my Amiga pounding out the latest arcade games. I wanted Amiga development to continue. I wanted 16-bit computing to be the foundation for video gaming, and thanks to Nintendo coming along with the cheap-ass, arcade-style NES console that even Mom could play Duck Hunt. Super Mario Brothers was a huge hit with huge demographics. The NES brought gaming back to the masses. That is why it saved the industry. Computing did not bring gaming back to the masses because it was niche. It was expensive. For crying out loud, a Commodore 64 was $5.99, man. Commodore 64. My wristwatch has more power than the Commodore 64. $599. That's out of the reach of the common man. You can't convince Mom to go flat you down $599 for a computer, especially a computer that the schools didn't have. And if you wanted to buy an Apple II, you were talking about, $1,500? Right? At $599 looked like a deal. And Mom and Dad still weren't popping for that. But look at this. Here's the NES. For, $189, I think, something like that. For $189, you can have, our almost arcade-perfect games at home. And Mom and Dad didn't have to fork over $600. They would in the coming months buying cartridges for the damn thing. But they were successful in the task of making people in large quantities want to game. And that is what happened the previous generation. The Atari 2600 was like having a TV. You go to somebody's house, there's their TV, there's their 2600. On the playground, kids talked about what they had at home. Remember the console wars? Well, I've got an Intellivision at home, a ColecoVision, 2600. Video games were a cornerstone of a generation. And it wasn't just the kids that were into it. Well, once computing was trying to fill the gap, it wasn't fast enough. Nintendo swooped down and brought the market back to consoles. Everybody on the planet should be kissing Nintendo's collective ass right now, because without them, we'd be gaming on computers. Probably closed types format computers, much like the Amiga or the Atari ST, because it would have been conducive to good gaming. So all this time I've been talking about what used to be going on, what used to happen, how Nintendo saved the bacon. Now, let's talk about what happened to video games after that. So the NES came back and was a broad base unit. I mean, I know girls that had it. I know adults that had it. Of course, the teen boy, the teen adolescent kid is always going to have a video game. But it brought it to the masses. We step another generation. We start to watch the changeover. We start to see the Super Nintendo generation, right? The games at the arcade kind of took a turn. You know, things got more mature. The Mortal Kombats got popular. The fighting games got popular. We started removing accessible games from the marketplace for inaccessible games. You give a guy who's not a big video game player 2 quarters, or in this case maybe like 5 quarters. Give him 2 quarters and say, go play Pac-Man with this quarter, and then go play Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo World Elite Super Criterion Edition over here. Oh, and that Japanese guy that's on the other controls, don't worry about him. You're going to play him, but it's better than playing the computer. So the guy goes and plays Pac-Man, and, okay, he loses a life or 2 before he knows what's going on, but his last life he's chugging along pretty well. He's got a couple levels under his belt, ate a couple fruits, saw a couple animations. The guy that just had to throw down against Hirohito over there just got his ass handed to him. It took him about 15 seconds for the guy to combo the crap out of him. In the meantime, the guy's getting his ass clobbered, and he hasn't even figured out what to do with 6 buttons yet. You know, he's kind of clueless. Gaming became complex, too many buttons, too many controls, and it became targeted to a certain niche. The mature content. Anything that was not mature content, anything where you didn't hand a guy, you know, his nads in a basket, that's a kiddie game. So Nintendo, trying to preserve their own ideals of keeping the mature content down, not having blood in Mortal Kombat 2, or I'm sorry, Mortal Kombat 1. I fixed it. Don't anybody write. I know it was in Mortal Kombat 1. They had their own ideals to work with. You know, they were looking at Japanese values, and they still do a lot to date. And so they chose to not go that direction. They chose not to go with the mature content. Well, the problem was the mature content became the driving force of the industry as soon as graphics started getting good enough to properly show somebody's arms being pulled out of the socket and being beaten with them. You know, as soon as we got into 3-dimensional gaming, where all of a sudden gaming wasn't about playing a game, it was about an environment. To me, that's kind of where things started going downhill. You could put anybody in front of Pac-Man. Anybody. Your sister, your grandma, your little brother, your father, your mother, Uncle Toot, or Aunt Tootie and Uncle Bob. You can put them in front of Pac-Man. Simple control. Simple game elements. And you know what? Some of them are going to say, this is just a baby's game, right? That'll be the kid that grew up with an Xbox controller tattooed on his ass. The other grandma's going to say, hey, damn, I didn't realize what this was all about when this first came out. This is kind of fun, right? Because gaming isn't about a niche market. It never has been, or it was never supposed to be. Game developers made games that were fun for everybody. And that is why the NES came along and stomped the ass out of computers. Computers scared the crap out of people in the early 80s. My mom's still afraid of computers. Even though she uses one, she still thinks that they're watching her. She's got a tinfoil hat on and everything. She doesn't like to be on the computer. She does it because she has to. You know, people were afraid of computers. And to make somebody pay $600 to be afraid wasn't going to work out. So price was obviously a factor back then. Accessibility to gaming. Simplicity of controls, right? The Genesis shipped with a 3-button controller. Well, 3 primary buttons, start, select, the 2 shoulder buttons. But that didn't scare a lot of people. They kind of got worked up. You put an Xbox 360 or a PlayStation 2 controller, even a GameCube controller, into the hands of the uninitiated, they are going to run. They're going to resist. Too complicated. I shouldn't have to, and you should never have to hold a button down and press another button. You should never have to hold down L and press A. You just lost like half the damn population, right? So what have we learned here? We've learned that gaming was a mass market appeal before the crash. After the crash, Nintendo brought it back. And then due to whatever factors, and I'm sure we could lament about this endlessly, gaming slid into a niche market because graphics started getting good enough to where people's more violent side came out. I don't know, whatever. I'm not a psychologist, folks. I'm only talking about what I see. Along came the PlayStation 1, and that was the beginning of the end. It really was. Three-dimensional graphics became three-dimensional worlds, which became three-dimensionally too damn complicated for most people to play. We had to add more buttons because now we had to control the camera. Now we had this immense world. Now we've got to make it as real as possible. You need to be able to itch your ass by holding down L, R, X. Or you need to be able to throw massive mega combos doing up, down, left, right, up, down, start, A, B, B, C, C, fatality. Yeah, well, guess what, folks? Grandma ain't playing Mortal Kombat. And little Susie's not playing Halo, right? There has to be a way to get gaming back to the glory days, man. That's why I've been predicting this crash. You can't feed a niche market forever. Niche markets are just that. They're niches. You know, we've got the same games coming out for essentially the same consoles that have beefed up graphics and beefed up processors. We are no longer interested as a whole in making games for the masses. We are making games for the person, not for the people. And when that happens, you are eventually, and I've said this before a million times, you are eventually going to top off on how far technology can take you in improving the gaming process. You know, when you get to a point to where you can't make Greedo the Killer Pimp any more realistic, when you've gotten to the point to where the physics engines are so good that the blood splatters and runs down your screen, you are no longer going to be able to hide behind the fact that the games are all the same. We've got 3 or 4 models of gaming, and they are carrying the load. Well, guess what? Just like anything else under great strain, it's going to snap. And a crash will occur if that happens. Now, amazingly enough, up to about a year ago, and I've been tentatively keeping my trap shut. I've been tentatively looking at the waters, watching the offerings, taking a look at what strategies everybody was going to come up with for the next generation. I am convinced now, more than ever, that without intervention, the crash would have come very soon. Very soon. Because let's take a look at what is coming on the next generation, what we knew up front a year ago. As of a year ago, what did we know? We pretty much knew all about the Xbox 360, incredibly high-priced, split technology, games that will run properly on one of the technologies but not the other. Sounds more and more like PC gaming every day. We knew nothing really about the PlayStation 3, except for it was supposed to be the be-all, end-all, do-all of existence, including handing you your sync. And we knew a little bit about the Wii. A lot of speculation back when it was still called the Revolution, a much better name in my opinion, but the Wii's kind of grown on me. We knew nothing. We knew nothing. So all I had up to about a year ago was, crap, same games, more graphics. All right, well, we're one generation closer to the crash. You know, how realistic the Xbox 360 graphics could be, the PlayStation 3 graphics could be, whatever. The more realistic they looked, the closer to the crash we were going to get. The more realism you get, the less people are going to be clamoring for a technological leap. The PSP, the PlayStation Portable, came out swearing to God it was going to wipe up the floor with the DS because it was so technologically advanced. A portable PlayStation 2 to take on the go. I'll be honest with you. As a freshly crowned Nintendo DS owner, the PSP scared me because I kind of liked the DS. I mean, I had just gotten it. I'd only been a few months into it. And, while the initial offering was a little on the weaker side, I was having a good time because I was doing some stuff that was new, different. I like new and different. I'm kind of a new and weird, different guy myself, so I like that sort of thing. And when I heard about the PSP, it's like, crap. Here comes another graphic horror console to come out. It's going to smash the DS, and I suck. Well, it's important to note that Nintendo has fought this battle more than once. The Atari Lynx, the Sega Nomad, the Sega Game Gear. You know what? No one's touched them yet. And apparently, while the PlayStation Portable is doing okay, the DS continues to dominate pretty much everywhere. That's when I saw that the DS was still selling well. That was the first hint. Hey, wait a minute. They just released a graphic horror handheld from a huge company that had lots and lots of money to push almost anything through the market possible, and people are still wanting to game on the DS. Maybe it's possible, that people are already figuring it out. Great graphics don't equal great game. It's really that simple, but are the masses figuring it out? Well, the fact that there have been like 16 million DS sales, it's sold out all over Japan. 10% of Japan owns a DS. 10% of an entire country, and not a Rhode Island country, but a real country. 10% of them own DSs. They can't keep them in stock. The Nintendo DS games, a handheld, low-cost, low-technology handheld, has 9 out of the 10 top games on Japan's charts. That's including PS2, Xbox. That's just not Game Boy Advance versus Sony PlayStation Portable versus DS. That's every gaming console in Japan. The DS owns 9 of the 10 slots at the time of this recording. Or last week. It depends on, I haven't looked at the weeklies, but suffice to say, somebody's figured it out. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but this could be a fluke. The PSP costs too much. The battery life's not very good. They chose a poor medium, the UMD. Maybe it's just Sony screwing up that's made the DS popular. So I had to wait a little bit longer. And I had to wait a little bit longer. I had to find out about the Revolution. Could the Revolution be the savior of gaming? Nintendo did it before. I wasn't happy that Nintendo did it before, but I'm kind of getting to the point now where I'm jonesing to play some video games. And I ain't playing it on a 360, and I'm sure as hell not going to shovel out $600 for a PlayStation 3. So I really only have one direction to go, and that's with the Wii. Something I can afford, but more importantly, it's not about money. Apparently it is about money when it comes to mass appeal, but that's for later. I had to wait until I saw the Wii and how much it was going to ship for, what Nintendo was going to do with it, and get a little more official press before I declared DEFCON 4 over with. Okay, let's be honest. More like DEFCON 3. When I heard the PlayStation 3 was going to clock in at $600, my mouth just dropped open. I mean, there's no words to describe the concept of paying $600 for a video game console. It just blew my mind. And I said, okay, I'm wrong. The next gen's over. I mean, the next gen's proved that the crash is on its way. Last week, we learned about the Wii. We learned about what it was going to do. Who was it going to be marketed towards? How was the financial piece of the pie going to work itself in? What do people think about the Wii? Can it restore the balance of gaming back to the everyday guy? Is it possible? I've been personally conducting my own tests. Since I got my DS Lite, I've had a couple of extra DSs kicking around. And silently, quietly, I've been slipping it into the hands of the non-gamers. I'll put something of mass appeal, something that people recognize, something that's simple, into the hands of people that don't play games, just to see, can it work? Recently, my latest project has been a 13-year-old girl. Very, very sweet. Her name is Brooke. Very, very sweet, but not a gamer. And probably not exactly a Mensa member, if you get my meaning. Very, very adorable. Very nice girl. Love her to death. I slipped her my red DS and a copy of Pac-Pix, and I said, you know what? Do me a favor. I want you know what Pac-Man is? Yeah, I know what Pac-Man is. Could you draw a Pac-Man? I mean, could you take a pen and draw a Pac-Man on a piece of paper? It's like, well, yeah, that's really easy. I said, okay, I want you to take this home and try it. Just try it. Play it a couple of levels. Just let me know what you think. I haven't been able to get my DS back from her because she simply won't bring it back. Pac-Pix has become like the central focus of her entertainment. She's been playing it like that. She's farther than I am on the game. So, we've identified there's a market for non-gamers. There's a market for people who have given up on gaming, much like myself before the DS came along. There are markets out there that are not niche. They are not the targets of generation console. The Xbox 360 does not care about casual gaming. Proven, tried, and true. The PS3 does not care about casual gaming. There's $600. There's no proof that there's any desire for casual gaming. They've got a niche market, and it's making them money hand over fist. You don't disrupt that momentum. You don't take risks. When you have a guaranteed wallet of cash coming your way, you don't take risks. You can't afford to take risks. Not when you're losing $200, $300, $400, $600 every time you sell a console. You can't afford to take risk. You go with what works. That's what Sony's doing. That's what Microsoft's doing. Nintendo is taking the risk. Just like they risked bringing the NES over here. Damn, what would you be thinking? Let's see, the entire market of gaming fell out from underneath the United States, but hey, let's spend a whole lot of money and take a huge chance and bring the NES over here. I mean, come on. I mean, that's risk. There's no risk in doing the same thing. And in doing the same thing and promoting complacency, that's suicide. That's suicide on a large, long-term level. Nintendo realized this. Nintendo could have spent just as much money losing money on every console as Microsoft or as Sony. They could have done everything the exact same way. They could have done it. In fact, they did start that way with the original Revolution. And then they said, you know what? GameCube graphics are fine. The problem is the GameCube controller scares people. The GameCube does not have good third-party support. The GameCube's already been branded a kiddie game system. We can't fix this model. It's broke. Nintendo's Wii, I believe, and there's no absolutes in this business, but the feedback that I've seen, even people that have already bought or are planning on buying a 360 have already said, you know what, I think I might have to have a Wii with that. That sounds bad, doesn't it? I might have to have a Wii with that. But no, I mean, but you think about it. Even Nintendo does not care about the core gamers. It's blatantly obvious because core gamers are graphics whores. They want ultra-realistic environments. They want to see sweat dripping off the guy's chin. They want all of that. Gameplay second. They need bragging rights. They need compensation for the small penis. They need the big gun. They need the better graphics. They need the high-def output. That's what they need to receive satisfaction as gamers. Real gamers don't give a rat's ass what platform it comes on. They don't give a rat's ass about anything. They want engagement. They want to do something fresh, new, and exciting. Now, is Call of Duty 3 brand new and exciting? Certainly not on the PC. Certainly not on the Xbox. Certainly not on the PlayStation. But what about the Wii? Can it offer us anything new? I mean, if the best graphics are on Xbox or PS3, whatever, we don't know yet. If the best it's not going to be on the Nintendo. It's not going to be on the Wii, I'll tell you that right now. But if the best graphics are somewhere else and it's the exact same game, where are you going to go? Right? I mean, that's just sometimes this is so obvious to me, it makes me want to scream. You have 3 consoles, A, B, and C. A's got the best graphics. If the same game comes out for A, B, and C, using identical controls, coming out at an identical price, coming out at the exact same time, and console A has the best graphics, the best sound out of all the 3 consoles, who's going to win? That's obvious. It's a blatant, obvious thing. If you take brand loyalty out of the equation, the Sony fanboys, the Xbox fanboys, the Nintendo fanboys, you take that out of the loop, who wins? Duh, right? So why on earth would Nintendo, or any company for that matter, want to compete in the same space? Nintendo doesn't want to lose money. They only do gaming, folks. Microsoft can afford to lose. Sony can afford to lose. Nintendo, that's all they do. They can't afford to lose. They have to win. They can't afford to lose cash. They've got to create an experience that not only is cost effective, because they learned that. They learned that with the NES, folks. They learned that price matters. Sony ain't figured that out yet. Price matters. You know, you got to lock in the parents. If you want to lock in the kiddie sales, you got to put it at a competitive price. Mom and Dad and Grandma ain't buying little Bobby a $600 console. Not going to happen. Oh, yeah, the rich bastards are going to buy their kids maybe, but what about the common man? We're right back into a niche. The rich can afford it. Oh, well, okay. So that knocks out the other 74% of the population. Nintendo had a very large task to create something that separates them, that brings people back to gaming en masse. How do you do that? Low prices, right? Accessibility. You can think whatever you want about the Wii Remote Control, the game controller, looking like a DVD remote. We have people that have had remote controls beaten into their hands. TVs, VCRs, DVD players. Nothing scary about that. There's not that many buttons on there, right? People can pick that up and not be afraid of it. People can act naturally. They can swing. They can move. Anybody can do that. Nintendo had a huge responsibility. The right price, the right interface, right? And you know what? And this is the part whenever I get into this discussion with people, especially fanboys. Well, you know what? If Microsoft wanted, they could just kick out the 360 remote and it could do the exact same thing and still have better graphics and still have Xbox Live Arcade, and they could just kick Nintendo's butt. Yeah. Look at the PS3. They've already added Nintendo's controller to theirs, so why would I want a Wii? You ignorant bastards. Take 2 seconds and think about that for just a minute. Okay? I would like to produce for you the Xbox Flight Stick. Remember that big $100 monstrosity to play? I can't remember the game. Someone's going to have to write in and tell me. It's like Falcon or F-14, something. Whatever it was $100. Please regale me with the amount of games that also use that controller. Yeah, let's see here. Okay, let me give you another example I'm a little closer to. How about the Guitar Heroes guitar? You've been playing a lot of games with that? Yeah. How many games use the Guitar Heroes guitar? 1. Let's see. What about the iToy? Yes, the iToy. That's really neat. You could do so many games with that. How many games have we actually seen for the iToy? Right? How many? How many have been released in the United States? There's been a bunch of them released over in Europe, but not here. We got like 3 games, 4 games. Most of them are like glorified tech demos, right? There's a difference. Let me explain to you the difference. Innate versus add-on. This is very simple, folks, and I'm going to talk about it in classic gaming terms. When the Amiga computer and all of its assets were bought by SCOM of Germany, when Commodore liquidated, went bankrupt, and they lost everything, and everybody was vying to buy the technology. You remember the story. The guy, Peter Tachinko, or whatever the hell his name was, who was just a grimy bastard, he got all of the American distributors, anybody in America that had a piece of the Amiga pie. I was working for a company called Better Concepts. They were a huge Amiga distributor, retail sales, repair. They did pretty much everything. And so I got to go to this meeting where the new owner of Amiga was asking everybody what their opinions were. We're going to unveil you the new Amiga 4000. We're going to do all sorts of these things at this special luncheon. So I went to this thing, and the guy rolled out a new Amiga 4000. This is the future we're going to take, and this is how much it's going to cost, and this is when you're going to be able to get them. And everybody was excited. And I said, well, wait a minute. Yo, Pete, where's the CD-ROM drive on that guy? Because I don't see it from here. I don't have a good seat, but I don't see it from here. Where's the CD-ROM drive? Well, there isn't one. It's like, dude, it's 1993. PCs have had CD-ROM drives for like 4 years now. We need it. The CD32 produces great gaming. There's great multimedia utilities. The CD medium is not an option. It's required. You want to grow? You got to put a CD-ROM drive in there. And he's like, and I'm like, don't you run a huge PC manufacturing company? The other half of your business, you manufacture PCs, right? Well, yes, yes we do. Okay. So why is there not a CD-ROM drive in there? Well, it would add to the overall cost to the unit. I said, okay. How much are we talking here, Pete? How much is a double spin, regular old, standard line item CD-ROM drive? How much does that cost to put in a unit? And I don't remember what the number was because my mouth was just sitting open the whole time. It was like $20. On a mass marketing scale, it was $20 to put a CD-ROM drive. And I said, wait a minute. Wait. So you're trying to pawn the Amiga 4000 off for $2,400, and you are going to snip around about a $20 CD-ROM drive? Have you lost your mind? And I knew in that very moment that the Amiga was doomed. I knew it was over right then and there. You know how sometimes you just know things, there's a click in the universe, a glitch in the matrix, and you know exactly what's going to happen? The moment that this guy couldn't be put out to put a $20 CD-ROM to ensure the future development of CD-ROM, the future of gaming and of everything, I knew it was over. And then I looked at the rest of my fellow distributors. I'm like, guys, hello, anybody going to jump on my back here and help me out? Because this guy's lost his mind. And they're like, no. Keep the price down. If customers want a CD-ROM drive, we'll add it to them before it ships. And I said, you guys are missing the point. You can't make it an add-on. Nobody will support it. Nobody's going to support it because it's not in every single one. If every single unit that ships doesn't have a CD-ROM drive in it, developers won't write CD-ROM applications, and it might as well be useless. You guys aren't thinking about the future. You're thinking about shaving $20 off a $2,400 item. You guys are killing me. And this is what I get when I go to the forums. Well, if the Wii takes off, then Xbox can just add a remote. It's like it's not going to cost that much, and it'll be really easy, and then Xbox will rule anyway. No, that's not how it works. It's going to be the same thing as everything else that becomes successful when it's part of a product and not successful on every other product when it becomes an add-on. If you have to add a Rumble pack, no one's going to use it. I mean, look at the DS. I mean, prime example. We've got a Rumble pack for the DS, and there's like 4 games that use it, and like 2 of them, maybe 3 games, and there's only 2 of them that use it actually worthwhile. Because it's the second thing. I mean, it's like, why should we add Rumble support when, like, maybe, the Rumble pack sales haven't been all that great. In fact, at one point they were giving away Rumble packs with games to try to get them out there. So why would you develop? Why would you waste development dollars working on something that you don't have a guaranteed market for? You don't. You know what you have? You have number of units shipped. You got 5 million units out. How many of them are going to have a iToy? How many of them are going to have a motion sensor remote? How many of them are going to have a $100 flight stick? Right? So you're going to say, well, we need to build for the masses, and the masses don't have this stuff, so just forget about it. That's why it will work on the Wii, and it won't work on the 360 or the PS3 to add it on later. In any event, the whole point of this discussion has been the crash could be averted. I'm not saying it has been yet. It's a little early to tell. I'll know more. Believe me, come December, January, when I see how the Wii's selling and what the games are actually like when I play them myself, what the customers, what the people think. I've seen it on the DS. The DS, in my opinion, was Nintendo's sneaky way of testing out whether the Wii would be successful or not. Can people handle disruption? Can people handle a stylus? Can people handle using a microphone? Can people handle a deviation from the norm? Are people ready yet? I think the DS says that they are. But as long as there's no options, there's no alternatives, where are they going to go? They're going to sit at home on their PC playing Bejeweled 2, 3, 4, and 5 because that's what they're interested in, but they can't get it anywhere else, especially for free or low cost. They're going to have to pay $69.95 for Bejeweled Deluxe on the 360 or whatever. What I'm saying is, folks, the crash could be averted. Nintendo could save the bacon again by being the only ones willing to take a risk. They're the only ones that are willing to deviate from the norm. They're the only ones willing to embrace a market that's not guaranteed. We don't know whether or not the mass public are going to get in on Wii's. I know that the mass public seems to like the DS. That's a good sign. The mass public seems to be able to embrace it. No little thanks to like Nintendogs and Sudoku. But will the Wii be able to do it? If the Wii fails, crash is still possible, folks. I'd say it's very possible. If the Wii succeeds, the competition, Sony, Microsoft, in the next generation, they're going to have to step up to the plate. They're going to have to come up with new and innovative ways of disrupting what's going on. They're going to have to disrupt what the paradigm is and move to casual gamers. Because they're going to want a piece of that pie, folks. That's what business is all about, making more money. And if Nintendo's making money hand over fist with the common gamer, you can bet your ass that Microsoft and Sony will be right behind them, riding on their coattails, trying to come up with the next big, easy way to get people involved. So we'll see what happens. I personally, from a guy that grew up hating Nintendo, from a guy that watched as Nintendo wrestled away control of gaming away from 8 and 16-bit computers, as a guy that really once wanted to put my foot so far up Nintendo's ass the water on my knee would quench their thirst, I've got a mad respect for him. Now, I've got a mad respect for a company that's willing to take the risk, that's willing to give me what I want. If there's no new games under the sun, if everything's been written and everything has to be a rehash or a sequel, for God's sakes, at least give me a different way to play it. At least let me set my own people trap on Call of Duty 3. At least let me jerk the gun out of the enemy's hand. Right? At least let me drive a car without having to buy a $49 steering wheel add-on. At least let me do something. Let me sword fight. For God's sakes, give me a frickin' lightsaber. Nintendo should be coughing up every penny they can to force LucasArts into making a lightsaber game using the Wii controller. Do you know how cool that would be? It's every kid's dream to wield a lightsaber. The Wii is the only way you're going to really get to do it in a video game. Not pushing AABB, AABB combo to do a lightsaber attack. I'll lose my freaking mind if I get a lightsaber on the Wii. And it's coming. I promise it's coming. LucasArts has already talked about it being in support of the Wii, as are tons of other companies, including right out of the box Electronic Arts, which is a good sign for the Wii. Just a matter of, can they fix it? Can they fix their thinking? They look like they already are to some extent. They're trying. They're thinking about it. They're seeing what Nintendo started. It's really hard, folks, to come in front of you, especially when I just ran a best of a couple months ago where I basically blast everything about Nintendo possible, to stand before you and say, they're coming. That Nintendo has earned my respect. For those of you who don't understand why I hate Microsoft, maybe someday they'll earn my respect. You never know. And for those of you who want to call me a flip-flopper or inconsistent or whatever. The sign of intelligence is not accepting things as they are, but to grow and accept things as they change. You can reevaluate your position. When you were a kid, did you like onions? But I bet you love onions on your burgers now, don't you? In fact, you can't even imagine a burger without onions on it. Does that mean you're a flip-flopper? You inconsistent bastard. You used to hate onions. Well, I like them now. What's the big deal? Same thing, folks. Same thing. You know why you like onions now? You've grown a taste. They taste good. You've understood now how onions enhance the flavor of foods. So what? So what? You didn't like onions as a kid and you like them now. You can hate. People can change. Companies can change. Things can change. Good sign of intelligence is being able to recognize change for good or bad and being able to appropriately place that in your life. And I feel that's what Nintendo's done. Starting with the Game Boy Advance SP. I have been impressed with what they've done. And I believe that if anybody can save us from a crash, if anybody can save us from the plateau of technology, it'll be Nintendo. Could be wrong. Who knows? Well, folks, that's going to wrap up our editorial commentary for this episode of Retro Gaming Radio. Tune in next month when I'll have yet another segment of me prattling on endlessly about something you may or may not care about. I promised you an update on the Year 7 DVD-ROM title. We are still in development. Just to give you a heads up, we're about halfway done with the DVD development itself. I've got my feelers out to my graphic artist, Gus, who, of course, has done the great covers for the last 3 editions of the DVD-ROM title. And we're also have one more piece of the puzzle put together, which, of course, is how do you get paid? Well, originally we have PayPal as well as snail mail for taking care of transactions, but a lot of people don't like to use PayPal, and nobody wants to actually, stick something in an envelope and mail it. I know I sure don't. So, in order to keep everybody happy, I've been looking at different mediums of payment, and one of them is Google Checkout, which most people seem to be fairly friendly with Google technology and Google products. So I finally figured out how to tap their API, work it into the website, and be able to take orders. Now, it's untested, but I've actually got code working, and that was a huge jump because the API is fairly complicated. So now that we have a couple more pieces into place, things should move along a little bit quicker. I'm really excited to get this thing out the door because I found some real gems digging through some of my old archive discs that I'm really excited to get out there into the hands of the people. And plus, of course, I've got all that cool footage of Troy and I doing Karaoke Revolution, which is a lot more funny than it should be. Anyway, so plus we're going to have all sorts of other good stuff, as always, stuck on the disc. So bear with us. We're getting closer. We want to make sure you get a top quality product. And once again, of course, you'll be able to pre-order it for $19.95 through the website. And after it's shipped, it'll be $24.95. Overseas shipping at $5 to cover the cost of going to the post office and having to do custom forms and extra postage and all that good stuff. So anyway, folks, that's a little update on the Year 7 disc. Again, my apologies for it taking so long, but again, we want to make sure it's quality stuff. For this month's interview, we have Matt Ownby, the brainchild, developer, project coordinator of the laserdisc game emulator Daphne. Daphne, of course, emulating Dragon's Lair, Space Ace, and a slew of other great laserdisc titles that you and I grew up with. Matt's been on the show before, but we've managed to catch up with him and talk about Daphne's past, present, and future, and what's around the corner. Here's Matt Ownby. Well, I've got here in my illustrious virtual studio Matt Ownby. What is your official position with Daphne, Matt?
I am the creator and the project coordinator.
The creator and project coordinator of the project known as Daphne, the laserdisc emulator, for lack of a better perfect term. Do you guys have a different tagline now, or are you still kind of going with that?
Well, to be funny, we call it the first ever multiple laserdisc arcade machine emulator.
There we go.
Wait, did I get that right? Anyway, whatever it is, the
right.
acronym stands for female, as a joke.
Nice. Well, looking at Daphne, who wouldn't want to talk about females? We're going to assume, because Matt's been on the show before, and a lot of people have followed closely the life cycle of Daphne and are pretty hip on it. But a lot of folks, we have a lot of new listeners, especially from the UK, compliments of my articles in Retro Gamer magazine and in Games TM. So let's start off, Matt, with what is Daphne? For people who have never used it, don't know what's going on, why do I even have you here? Tell them why Daphne is significant.
Well, in the early 80s, some companies started putting out these games that use laserdisc players, such as Dragon's Lair and Space Ace, and I was just about the right age to be absolutely in awe of those games when I first saw them. Like when I first saw Dragon's Lair, I was completely blown away, and I guess when we get older, we start thinking back to our youth and the things that we thought were really cool back then, and then we have a desire to kind of experience it again. So about in 1999 or so, I was thinking back, and I thought about Dragon's Lair, and I thought, that'd be really cool to play that game again, and I wonder if anyone has any of those discs, or if anyone still has those arcade games, and I mean, it was I knew that there was like CD-ROM versions and like Sega CD and a lot of different home versions, but I wanted to play the original arcade version that I saw in the arcade. And so that became my goal, is to write a program to be able to play the arcade version of Dragon's Lair on my home computer. So basically what Daphne is Daphne's kind of like a program that takes you back to the early 80s or the early 90s and lets you play the arcade games that you remember from those days exactly the way that they were in the original arcade. So it's kind of like a big nostalgia experience.
Now, for those people who are trying to figure out how do you get a Laserdisc game to play on a PC, can you give some details about how you can, because a lot of people do still remember what Laserdiscs look like. They're like these giant, huge platters. They're obviously not CDs or DVDs, and obviously you're not going to stick that in your DVD drive. So how does somebody go about playing a Laserdisc game on a PC?
Well, that was one of the challenges we had to overcome. When I first wrote Daphne, I had it controlling an original Laserdisc player because that was the easiest way to do it. But then, and I might have quit at that point, but I wanted other people to be able to play the game too. And I realized that very few people had Laserdiscs or the Laserdisc players, and so I thought about how I could bring Daphne to more people, and there was a lot of solutions proposed. Like people said, use DVD playback software to play like a DVD of it, or someone said use QuickTime, and so I looked at a lot of solutions, and I finally decided that the only good solution out there was to kind of make my own solution, because there weren't any solutions out there that could handle the seeking to different Laserdisc frames. So I took an open source MPEG-2 decoder, and I combined that with the Ogg Vorbis audio decoder, and made kind of a custom format for Daphne to use that's kind of friendly for seeking the different frames. And So basically, if you don't have a Laserdisc player, which most people don't, you can just acquire the MPEG of the Laserdisc along with the audio stream of the Laserdisc, and then Daphne will be able to present it to you as if it is an original Laserdisc.
Now, explain to people, especially the people who don't have years and years of playing Dragon's Lair. You know, there's something that they had in their, they had in their frat house or something like that. They went down and played a couple games here and there. It's part of their nostalgia, but they see them they see the DVD from Digital Leisure maybe sitting on the shelves, or they see a PC version of it. Why the importance of Daphne over using one of these pre-canned, over-the-counter type solutions?
Well, the importance is that the over-the-counter type solutions are kind of more of a simulation or an approximation of what Dragon's Lair originally was. It's kind of like they had it would be like you taking just the Laserdisc and making your own game out of it. So like the timing and the moves and little beeps and stuff aren't the same. And those of us out there like me wanted to play the exact arcade game as closely as possible, and that meant that the game needed to use the same program that the original arcade game used. And I mean, it's just kind of a philosophy of, I want to go back to my childhood and I want to play it exactly like it was in my childhood. I don't want to play, some version that someone made yesterday.
So, in essence, from a technological standpoint, just like MAME, a lot of people are familiar with MAME, that uses original ROMs that were dumped out of an actual arcade game. Daphne does the same process, right? You guys have gotten dumps of the actual ROM chips that existed inside the Dragon's Lair game that did all the controls, that did all the seeking, that did everything pretty much, that handled the timing, which sequences appeared when, all of that stuff. You guys dumped that out. You created an interpreter to play that back, and then used the actual Laserdisc footage to recreate the final experience.
Yeah, exactly. So when you play Dragon's Lair inside Daphne, it actually runs the original ROM program, and then when the ROM makes certain calls to control the Laserdisc player, then Daphne translates those into modern-day calls and controls an MPEG instead. So you're basically running the original program that you ran in the arcade, and including inserting coins, which that's always my personal favorite.
As well as pressing Ace and Captain and Cadet level on Space Ace. Right. Which I can never remember how I've got my keys mapped every time I go back to play it.
Right.
So now, how many games? A lot of people know Dragon's Lair, right? That's in the Smithsonian. Everybody knows Dragon's Lair. Maybe a few people know Space Ace, and a couple people are familiar with like Us Versus Them and a couple of those other ones. Can you give us a rundown as exactly what Daphne will play, providing you have everything aligned right, of course?
Uh-huh. Yeah, let me check that out. Looks like we've got Astron Belt, Badlands, Vega's Battle, Cliffhanger, Cobra Command, Dragon's Lair 2, Esches Oren Milla, Galaxy Ranger, GP World, Interstellar, Mach 3, Road Blaster, Super Don Quixote, Bear's Quest, and Us Versus Them. So between like 10 or 15 games.
Which is impressive. And how does a person, a common Joe, now the common Joe we're talking about, somebody who can use Word, maybe can write a macro or two, nothing real extraordinary. Some people that, may struggle a little bit putting MAME together, but they manage to do it. How complicated is it to get Daphne set up and running?
Well, historically, Daphne has been rather complicated to get set up and running, which is something that's kind of bothered me greatly over the years, and
probably cost you a lot of time in tech support too.
Yeah. I've been very interested in reducing the tech support side of things, and so my goal lately has been to make Daphne as easy to use as I possibly can, and so it's still maybe not quite as easy as I'd like it to be, but it's much easier than it was in the past.
So give us some ideas. A lot of people who have dabbled with Daphne in the past and may not know what's new under the hood. You guys have a 1.0 release coming up, which is almost unheard of in any emulator for that matter, to actually reach a 1.0. Give us some ideas for the old school folks like me. When I first got into Daphne, it was fairly complicated. Give the folks an idea what it used to be like to get Daphne set up and running. And now, using the new Daphne that's forthcoming, what's the difference? How have you improved the user friendliness?
Okay. So when Daphne first came out, you basically had you downloaded a zip file with an executable inside it, and you had to have a laserdisc player connected to your computer. You had to know what serial port you were connected to. You had to know what baud rate your laserdisc player was set to, and you needed to download the ROM images and put the ROM images in the right place, and maybe unzip the ROM images, and then you'd run the program and hopefully it would work. But there was like
hopefully it would work. Shrug and pray, right? Shrug and pray technology.
Yeah, I mean, I could always get it to work, but that's because I wrote it.
But obviously there were a lot of challenges with those 5 or 6 other people that probably had a Laserdisc player hooked up to their computers. So obviously that had to change, and you guys went forward and went ahead and used the MPEG videos. What did it consist of towards the middle of Daphne's life cycle?
Well, toward the middle, we added the MPEG and an OGG Vorbis support, like I mentioned, and that brought Daphne to a much greater audience. But there was still the problem of the people the people who wanted to play Daphne having to find the video files, find the audio files, and find the ROM files. And it wasn't that big of a problem at first because everyone was like so amazed at being able to just to play with the MPEGs that they were kind of like, whoa, this is really great. But then as new people came on and they found it difficult to locate the MPEGs, they'd always say, well, where is the MPEGs? And I would always say, oh, well, I don't want to be involved in that side of things because that has potential for legal complications that I don't want to be involved in. And
I think that probably is the number one reason, the number one thing that drove people away.
Right.
The undedicated, undevoted, the people who may be interested in seeing what all the hubbub was about, but don't care quite enough to go through all the trials and tribulations of trying to dig those MPEGs up.
Right, and I realized that. I realized that when I'm trying a new piece of software, I want to download it, I want to, press start, and I want it to just work. I don't want to have to learn anything about it. And I realized that was like one of the big problems with Daphne is it required people to learn about it in order to use it. I'm like, I need to eliminate this roadblock of having people having to learn about it and learn and use it. And oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I can't believe you heard me sucking in my breath like that. Don't you love technology? Somewhere along the way, an individual who shall remain nameless came up with a tool that would let you take certain versions of the over-the-counter products when Digital Leisure started remastering and recoming out with the Dragon's Lair DVDs, Space Ace DVD ROM titles and DVD video titles. Somebody released a little tool that would help solve some of the problems of trying to find those MPEGs. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So this individual who shall remain nameless, and by the way, a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people have assumed that it's me, but it's not me. Anyway.
I can attest to that because I know who the other person is, and it's not him. And it's not me.
So this guy put together this program called DVD to DAF, which basically will convert a lot of the commercial DVDs into a format that Daphne can use, which was a really big help because it made it possible for someone to at least be able to play Dragon's Lair. It may not have been the most convenient but at least it made it possible. So that was a good step in the right direction. But there was still the problem of, like, here, let me give you an example. And I hope the guy that I'm going to talk about isn't listening to this. Well, there's this guy who came in the chat room that we have, the Daphne chat room, and he said, I want to play Dragon's Lair, but I've got a Macintosh, and this DVD2 DAF program doesn't work on Macintosh. So some people said, oh, well, try like Virtual PC or something. He's like, I don't know how to do that. Oh, well, they said, well, go to a Windows user and have them convert it for you, and then copy the converted files and bring it back to your computer. He's like, I don't know how to do that. And I was like, man, this guy's really stuck, because, I mean, I can see what a big problem it is for him. So he's basically, the last I heard from him, he said he was going to, I can't remember what he was going to do. He said he was going to, like, buy, like, a Windows box or something just so he could convert the DVD. I'm like, whoa, that's going a little overboard.
I don't know. You can almost get a PC and a box of Cheerios these days, so it's, it's not like the $2,500 Macs. You can pick up a PC pretty cheap, but definitely you can understand the guy's situation. At least all 5 of the people that own Macs that want to play Daphne. Sorry. Yeah, I can just tell I pissed off 3/4 of my listeners. I assume there was no Linux opportunity either. Then I assume, right?
Yeah, there was no Linux opportunity.
So
but Linux users are generally a little bit more savvy, so they can usually figure stuff out like that.
They've got VMware; they can figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've progressed to the point now where you can actually a normal user could get this program from an undisclosed location. Thank God for Google, and throw in a legally purchased Dragon's Lair disc, and 5 hours later, they could have the files sitting on their hard drive that would allow them to go ahead and play Dragon's Lair. Now, there was one more piece of the puzzle, and I've always been kind of curious about this. The actual ROM images, as everybody knows, there's a controversy. You can't just go download the ROMs for Pac-Man or Donkey Kong because they're still owned by Namco and Nintendo, respectively. Yet the Dragon's Lair ROMs and Space Ace and all of the Super Don Quixote and all these other ones are all just sitting there, like on the was it Jeff's was it Project Dragon's Lair site?
Yeah, the Dragon's Lair project.
How did they get away with that? Did they get clearance from like I can't remember who actually owns that firmware, but how does that work out? Have you guys had problems legally with that?
We've never had any problems legally, as far as I know. And I never wanted to take the risk. That's why I never hosted the files myself. But as far as
I never saw them on your site.
Yeah, I've never hosted any of those files. But as far as I know, Jeff Kinder's never had any legal problems with it, and I don't really expect him ever to have any legal problems, because I think that the only reason that he would ever have any legal problems is if one of the companies who own those ROM images thought that they had the potential to make money. Yeah. And I think the way it is, I think it's kind of pretty much accepted by everyone that the ROM images don't have any potential to make money, so no one's going to go to the trouble of trying to give him any grief about it.
That's always helpful. Now, the DVDs, though, on the other hand, the actual media content, which artist Don Bluth, my hero, my personal hero, and Gary Goldman and John Pomeroy were responsible for, there is some definite inherent value in that. And
right.
So tell us about your relationship with Digital Leisure through all of this.
All right, well, at the very beginning, I didn't really have a relationship with Digital Leisure, and so I kind of, my course of action was just to kind of make sure that I conducted myself in a way that would make sure that they never had a reason to complain about what I was doing.
Right. Which
I think that's kind of been my policy all along, which has made a lot of people very frustrated because they want more tech support.
Right.
But I've always kind of taken the stance of, well, I don't really know what Digital Leisure is thinking, and I don't want to like anger him, so I'm just gonna play it safe and keep myself out of trouble. But I was after this after this experience with like the Mac user I was talking about, I was thinking, this DVD to DAF program is just too hard to use. I mean, it works well, but it's just too hard. What we really need is to be able to have someone download Daphne, run the program, click on Dragon's Lair, hit start, and have them insert like a Digital Leisure DVD, and have like Daphne do all the conversion stuff necessary to get the thing working, and then have the game actually run. So that the only thing the user has to do is like put the DVD in the drive and hit start. And I thought, that's what we really need. And I thought, well, I can't really do that without getting permission from Digital Leisure, because what I really wanted to do was I didn't want to just have a converter program out there for every single DVD, CD-ROM, DVD video that Digital Leisure puts out, because that's like way too much work. What I really wanted to do is I wanted to just verify that they own the DVD and then download an MPEG of Dragon's Lair that I know is working, so that way everyone's using the same MPEG, and when they have tech support problems, they I know exactly what's wrong. I don't have to say, well, what MPEG are you using? Where did you get it? How did you convert it? I want everyone to use the exact same MPEG of Dragon's Lair to make the tech support easier. And so that brings me to the next step, which is actually contacting Digital Leisure. And I was so ready to put a stop to the tech support questions that I finally emailed Digital Leisure, and I asked them for permission to do what I just said. I said, what I want to do is I want to have them run Daphne. I want to have them put in a Digital Leisure DVD-ROM. I want to have the user click start, and I want to have it download a Dragon's Lair MPEG off the internet after they've been authenticated. And I was like, so what do you think? And they said, sounds great, go for it.
It was really that easy? I mean, there was no like, well, let us talk to our legal people and blah, blah. They just fired back an email and said, sure?
Well, they said, let us talk to everyone that we need to get approval from. There's a number of people that hold interest in the Dragon's Lair property.
Yeah.
So they needed to get it cleared by everybody, but they got approval from Rick Dyer, they got approval from Gary Goldman. So David Foster at Digital Leisure said, go for it, do it. So that's what's going to be in the 1.0 release that's coming up is, hopefully it's going to be like the easiest way to play Dragon's Lair and the easiest way to use Daphne, which, that's been my goal. I just want everyone to be able to, I don't want to hear any more excuses about, I can't figure out how to work this DVD to DAF program.
Well, and it's important to note here that it's not like you're getting paid. This is a free product. You're doing this because you love the technology, you love the games, and I personally just cannot wrap my hands around the concept of how rude and butthead some people can be about a product they've paid nothing for, that they have absolutely no vested interest in other than getting something for free, how far they are willing to take their displeasure on the people that are doing them a favor. And I bet if we've got time, I would love to hear some of your absolute best tech support horror stories. Because I bet there are some excellent stories. But let's move along to Daphne 1.0.
Okay.
Now, there's no release date.
Right.
And there's a good reason for that. You have your own philosophies on software development. You have your own philosophies on how Daphne, and as the project coordinator, you have the option to do so, how Daphne should be developed. Give us an idea of the difference, your different philosophy and thoughts on Daphne 1.0.
Well, in the beginning, my philosophy was, I'm making this program to play Dragon's Lair, and it's gonna be just enough so that I can get it working, and if anyone else wants to play it, then they're kind of on their own. I don't want to do tech support. And I saw over the years that kind of backfired on me, because sometimes I would say, oh, I wonder what people think about Daphne. So I'd get on Google and type in Daphne, and I'd go start reading on message boards about what people are saying. And
you got trolled in, didn't you?
I don't know. I don't know about that, but I started reading, and there was two common themes. The first theme was Daphne's way too hard to use. Don't even think about trying to get it to work. I'm like, oh. And the second theme was the Daphne creators are all jerks, and they're, if you ask them for help, they're really mean and they're unhelpful. I'm like, oh, I don't like that.
So we all worry about what people think of us, no matter how much we'd like not to.
Well, it's not so much what they think, it's just I was worried that it might be true. I'm like, ew, am I really a jerk? Yeah.
Coming from somebody who's known you for a few years, I know you're not a jerk.
Oh, thanks.
Not a problem. That's what I'm here for. Boost the confidence level. So, in essence, you got sucked into providing the tech support because you felt that the product in its current state, way back when in the early versions, was not a good reflection on yourself, your team, and what you were trying to accomplish with the product, which was to allow people to get to relive this part of their past.
Well, yeah, I mean, I had a choice. I could either say, well, these guys are the real jerks, and I don't want them using Daphne anyway.
Right.
or I could say, I've gone to a lot of trouble writing this program, and I'd really like for everyone who wants to use it to be able to use it, because I've gone all this trouble, it might as well get used by someone. And that was kind of the choice I took. Was I just felt that if I didn't make Daphne easier to use and more approachable, that I'd kind of be wasting a lot of work that I had put into it, because part of the reason I did all the work was so people could use it. And if no one's using it, then it's kind of, I don't get a return on my investment. So my philosophy sort of changed into, I want this program to be as easy as possible to use, and I want everyone who uses it to have a good experience with the Daphne team. I want to be polite to everyone, and I want to be courteous. And if there's someone that I absolutely can't be polite to, I'm just going to ignore them instead of say anything.
Anybody who gets more than 100 emails a day learns quickly that it's not worth it. Been there several times myself. Understand. Sometimes you type about half of a response and say, nope, not worth it.
Yeah, it's not worth it.
Discard changes. So why no release date? I mean, obviously, when it comes to software, it's always how much is it and when do I get it? Well, we know how much it is. It's free. Right. So the next question on everybody's lips is, when do I get it? And you're keeping that on the down low. You're keeping that date open. Obviously, when it's ready has been something we've heard millions of times from millions of vendors, normally Epic Games producing Duke Nukem Forever. But in your case, you have some definitive philosophies about the whole when is it ready or what's the release date scenario.
Right. Well, this is something I've learned over the years, and which I think a lot of emulation authors or anyone who writes free software has probably learned, is that the moment you become obligated to people, or you become obligated to do something for people or deliver something at a certain time, that's the moment when the project stops being fun and when it becomes more of like a chore and when you start to resent it. And I've kind of got myself caught in that trap a few times in the past, where I've said I'll do this if you do this to the users, and the users are like, okay, and then I'm like, oh, well, this is taking longer than I thought, or this is harder than I thought, and giving people like a release date doesn't really do me any good if you think about it. It doesn't really do me any good to give people a release date, because that kind of makes me obligated to them in a way. Even though I could say, it's just a free program, we're not going to stick by that release date. But if I give people a release date, then there's inevitably going to be someone who comes and says, is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet?
Sure.
And it's just, the main thing with these free projects is you have to keep them fun, and I found that it's really not a good idea to be obligated to people, and that's why I've been trying to be careful lately about not agreeing to anything.
Yeah, this is preaching to the choir here. I'm supposed to put this show out once a month, right. And I'll tell you what, if it slips past the 30th or the 31st, you'd think that I took away their ball. And I appreciate. I am totally thrilled that somehow this little insignificant show that I've put together is somehow so desired that someone is willing to come and lambaste me on my forum if the show's not out on the right time. There's something complimentary about that. But at the same time, it gets old really, really fast.
Yeah.
You know all about that.
Yeah.
It's something that software users at the bottom of the food chain, so to speak, people who don't develop software, people that don't work on deadlines, people that have a 9-to-5 job that never have to deal with deliverables, they don't get it. And I understand that. I mean, I totally understand that they have no experience in it. But then you get the other group, usually, in Daphne's case, I'm sure, you get more of the techie group, the group that, they have worked on deliverables. They do understand sometimes it's not smart to put out a release date. To understand that, like you said, as soon as it becomes work, you don't want to do it anymore.
Right. You start to resent it.
And you start to resent it. And that's, SourceForge is absolutely packed with those sort of projects. And I think you're pretty smart just saying, hey, I'm working on it. Now, do I want to see Dragon's Lair on the GP2X almost more than I want to take my next breath? Absolutely. And we're going to get to that in just a minute. But I totally understand life has to come first, and it's free. And I donated, and I asked other people to donate. A lot of people from the show that listen to the show came and donated. I just look at that as keeping it fun. If you're getting paid, things tend to be more fun. If there's some sort of a return on, like, as you said, return on your investment.
Right.
And, being able to get a new piece of hardware like a cool GP2X and being able to start developing, that's exciting. But, that takes coinage to do stuff like that.
Right.
And people have to understand it's a free program, but, they can't expect you to, lay out $189, out of pocket just so that you can provide them with something for free.
Exactly.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing at all wrong with that. So, honest programming for an honest buck, that's what I say. I mean, Daphne's definitely worthwhile, especially for, and I'm sliding off on a tangent, but for people who want the real deal. You can go out right now and buy a Dragon's Lair DVD-ROM for probably $19 or less in the bargain bin, and you can have some sort of an experience with it. Just like you could go out and buy a Sega controller that plugs into your TV that plays Sonic the Hedgehog. And while it kind of looks like Sonic, if you played Sonic more than like 5 times, you'll know that's not really Sonic the Hedgehog. It's something that's like Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
And Daphne, to me, there are things about these games, like Dragon's Lair. Space Ace is my deal. That's my thing. Dragon's Lair was cool. Space Ace, as many people who've listened to this show a billion times, I've said it. I had dreams about finding Space Ace when it suddenly vanished out of production. You couldn't find it anywhere. I still have dreams. Even today, even having Daphne, possibly one of the greatest emulators of all time at my disposal, I still dream about seeing a Space Ace, a real Space Ace machine in an arcade. I still dream about it. I had one like last month. And it's always wrong. It's always the right characters, the right setting, but the moves are all different, and I can't finish it. It's creepy. Have you had dreams like that? Where you find machines that look like Dragon's Lair, and they say Dragon's Lair, or they say Space Ace, and then, this is probably like totally creepy to you, right? This is like, Shane, I can't believe you actually dream about this. It's a video game! Right?
I'm thinking, and I really can't think of any dreams I've had like that. I'm sorry to say.
That's too bad. I guess I really am just weird. So, so somebody's got to pay the check. We're kind of coming full circle to something I wanted to talk about. somebody's got to pay the check, and either it's going to be you paying it in your time, or folks throwing you some donation money, which is always cool. So these files, these MPEGs, we all know that each of these we don't all know, but each of these laserdisc games runs somewhere about 15, 20, 30 minutes of footage. Mm-hmm. And an MPEG 2, that's DVD speak, that's a pretty good size file. That's a pretty good chunk. I mean, you're talking about, was Dragon's Lair like 1.5 gigs? Something like that?
It all depends on how it's encoded, but about 1 gig for each game, you can say.
That's a lot of space. I mean, that's like bigger than a Linux distro.
Right.
So how do you support that sort? I mean, if you're talking, let's say let's say 10,000 people get Daphne 1.0 when it gets released, and all of these guys want a 1 gig file from you. I don't care how generous your ISP host is, that's going to set you back some bank. How did you work around that problem?
That's right. I'm glad you asked me that.
I bet you are.
Well, the way we worked around that is by integrating BitTorrent, the BitTorrent protocol, with the new Daphne loader that we're going to be including in the 1.0 release.
The potentially evil torrent.
Right.
Either you love it or you hate it, depending on which side of the motion picture camera you're on.
Right.
So you're using torrent technology. For people who do not understand torrent technology, I know it's really common these days. Give us an overview, just quickly, of what is torrent. How does that help solve your problem?
Well, what it is it's basically a really nicely designed peer-to-peer network system that basically allows you to, when you download, like let's say you download the Dragon's Lair MPEG, you basically will be downloading it from everyone else who's either downloading it or has downloaded it, and you'll download it at approximately the same speed that you're uploading back to them. So you're basically uploading and downloading at the same time. And if you have a really fast upload link, which I used to have, which I don't anymore, but if you have a really fast upload link, you can get really fast downloads, even when everyone else may be downloading it at a really slow download link. So it's really a really nicely designed system, and it's very popular for that reason, I'd say.
And that might freak a couple of people out, because normally when you hear things like peer-to-peer or torrent or that sort of sharing process, you start getting the negative connotations to it.
Right.
Now, obviously, you've done your footwork. The items that will be shared, the MPEG files, you've got permission to do so.
Right.
As long as, of course, they can prove that they're entitled by sticking their disc in.
Right.
So how does this affect a person in terms of security? I mean, I'm sure you know a lot about the BitTorrent system now, having worked with it and integrated into Daphne. A lot of people, especially these days with all the media hype and fear that's going around, they're going to say, well, people are going to be downloading from my computer and I'm not going to know. How does that happen? Am I going to have to worry about them getting my IP address? How does that affect the security? And what are the options if people don't want to torrent? Are they still going to have the ability to say, well, I don't want to download it. Can I just rip it off my disk? Are there going to be options for those sort of people?
Well, let's talk about security first. Security, I guess you could say that there's always an increased risk of security breach by opening up ports, incoming TCP ports, and by connecting to other people's computers. And I understand that some people are paranoid about that. And so what I say to those people is, use it if you want to, don't use it if you don't want to. I knew that there was going to be some people out there who are going to be more concerned about it, maybe didn't want to take whatever perceived risks. And so I specifically made it so that you don't have to do the BitTorrent stuff. But on the other hand, as far as tech support is concerned, I'm only gonna provide tech support if they do it the way I've set it out for them to do it. If that makes sense.
That's totally fair.
Right.
That's totally fair. So there will not be something for people who own the disc. Let's say they don't have broadband.
Right.
You know, a gig on 56K. I mean,
Right.
I haven't done the calculation on that, but you're talking a month.
Yeah.
You know,
It could take a long time.
so basically what you're saying is there's no innate way, whether you tech support it or not, for them to be able to, through the Daphne interface, go ahead and rip those MPEGs down on their own from their own disk offline, unless they want to use something like DVD to DAF or one of those, shall we say, grayware tools.
That's correct. There's only going to be one way to play Dragon's Lair automatically through Daphne, because I want to make the tech support as easy as possible. So I need to know that everyone's using the same files.
And the ROM images and all that stuff come down with it, right? You still don't have to go over and visit the official Project Dragon's Lair site and
right.
And
Yeah,
get those.
the ROM images will come down with it. That's correct.
So go ahead.
So people, if they are like the 56K user and they don't want to download the huge thing, or if they don't have like a lot of hard drive space, because
They are huge.
this proposal will take up a lot of hard drive space, which I've thought about. There's always the option to turn off the automatic stuff and do it manually, but that's going to be kind of more the, you're on your own type stuff.
Well, and those are probably the more power users anyway.
Yeah.
Now,
right.
the question that I'm sure you've heard a billion times, while we're on the subject of the technology piece of it, I'm sure a million people have asked you, and it's an obvious answer, but just for the people who aren't thinking about it, a lot of people say, well, MPEG 2, come on. We've got MPEG 4, we've got XVID, we've got DivX, heaven forbid. We've got, I could compress that 1 gig down to 200K, or 200 meg. Why can't we do that? Why couldn't you distribute us a smaller set of files?
Well, there's a few reasons for that. The first one is that the MPEG-2 decoder is one that's open source, and I was able to modify and make it so it could seek to different laserdisc frames, which a lot of times, like the codecs you get for Windows or whatever, like XVID and DivX, they're not really designed to seek to frame accurate spots in the video stream, and so I needed to use something that was open source that I could modify. So that's the first reason, is because the library was there and I used it. The second reason is because, this is always up for debate, but I tend to feel that MPEG-2 has better video quality than the newer stuff.
Well, let's be honest. If you have a 1 gig source file and you compress it 12 times, it's only common sense that you're going to lose quality.
Right.
You have to. Something has to go.
Right.
In order to make that happen, be it frame rate or, quality.
Right.
And for those people who are like still going, no, he could use XVID. He's just yanking my chain because he doesn't want to change the library. I challenge you to throw an XVID up on your computer and try to manually seek back and forth through that file and see how long it takes and what sort of pixelization you get when it actually restarts playing and all those other various little nuances that happen to follow. XVID's great if you want to encode a movie and throw it on something and watch it, as long as you don't want to stop and rewind it. and that's obviously an inherent limitation of the technology. So give the guy a break. Live with MPEG-2. It's going to be a gig, but when did you think you'd ever play Dragon's Lair on your home computer, right? Suck it up and give it a gig of space. Trust us, you'll like it. Brings me to my next topic, Dragon's Lair to go. Now, a lot of people have been following my show the last few months when I've started talking about the GP2X, the quirky little Korean handheld, open source. It's not like the PSP where you got to hack the crap out of it to run anything that Sony doesn't want you to. Not like the DS where it doesn't have any removable media. It's something where it's open to everybody. And I got wind from somewhere, I don't know, a couple months ago, that you were indeed interested in porting Daphne down to the GP2X. And at one point, I asked my listeners to offer donations to help you get the GP2X so you could develop on it, because you're not going to be able to develop without having the hardware. And certainly, all of the enjoyment I've gotten out of Daphne has been well worth what I donated. So what about the GP2X? how's it coming? What are the sort of challenges you're dealing with the GP2X version? And are we going to get one someday?
Well, the challenge is I am indeed interested in porting Daphne to the GP2X, first of all. The challenges were quite a bit higher than I first anticipated. Like when I first saw the specs on the GP2X, I saw that it had 2 CPUs, and it supported SDL, the simple direct media library, which Daphne also uses. And I thought, oh, so I basically assumed the best of the handheld. I assumed, okay, they've taken SDL and they've made it completely hardware accelerated for the GP2X, which includes adding, full hardware acceleration support for the YUV hardware services, which Daphne uses to make it fast. And I'm like, sweet, that's great. And then I also assumed that since it had 2 CPUs, that if you had a program that had more than one thread going at the same time, that it would automatically run one thread on each CPU for you. So I was basically assuming the best about the handheld, and that was kind of the premise I had when I sort of took on the project and got everyone involved. And then when I got it, I found out that it was pretty much the opposite. The SDL library they had didn't have any hardware acceleration at all. It was basically just a software-only solution, so it was really slow. And the second CPU could only be used by their built-in video player to play like XVID videos and I can't remember the other, like MPEG-4, XVID, DivX, stuff like that. It wasn't designed to play MPEG-2, so what I did was I got Daphne compiled on it, and I optimized it, and I basically got Dragon's Lair kind of working but it was just way too slow, and so I kind of got discouraged. I'm like, yeah, I can't believe they advertised that they support SDL and they have 2 CPUs. Like, why do they even advertise they have 2 CPUs if you can't even use them?
Well, sure.
So I kind of got discouraged, and I saw that there's like a GP2X community hacking away at stuff, and someone's kind of got hardware acceleration working under some circumstances. So I see that there's like a community that's kind of hacking away at this and making more progress. So what I decided to do was I decided to, rather than wait around for that to happen, I decided to move to the next phase of my plan. And when I asked for the donations for the GP2X, I said that anyone who donated would be able to vote for things I work on next in Daphne. So I said, oh, well, I'll put the GP2X stuff on hold now, and I'll just go to that next step and take care of the voting. So I set up the voting for a while, and then that's kind of where we're at now is we're ready to do a new version. So my plans now are to do this new release, and then go back and look at the GP2X stuff. But the thing that I worry about, and the thing people have to realize is that I can only work on the GP2X stuff if it's fun.
Of course.
And when I run into things like what I think I feel is kind of like false advertising. When I run into things like I can't use the second CPU like I thought I would be able to, and the SDL library doesn't work like I thought it would. I kind of feel like I was tricked a little bit, and I kind of feel discouraged, and so it just kind of slows me down.
Well, understandably so. As we talked about before, if it's not any fun,
Right.
So just from a curiosity's point of view, especially for those of us who are GP2X sluts, what are you still using? Did you rescale the MPEGs? Are you using the raw MPEGs? What sort of video formats are you using? And does the decoding? I mean, in other words, what I guess I'm asking is, have you tried using, say, MPEG 1 instead of MPEG 2, rescaling it down to the actual 320 by 240 size? What's causing it to be so slow?
Yeah, I actually did scale it down to 320 by 240, and I set the bit rate to something ridiculously low, like 500 or 500, what is it, kilobits or bits, whatever
Yeah.
Anyway, it's like really small. I made like the quality like absolutely horrible. I made, I just made it. I tried to make the file as small as I possibly could. I got the file down to like 20 megs or something of Dragon's Lair, and I turned off the audio so that wasn't interfering. And basically, the thing that was slow was, it was all in one CPU first of all. So it would read it had like two or three threads. It would read in the video stream, it would decode it, and then it would have to convert the YUV frame into RGB using software, which is really slow and which wasn't supposed to be an issue for me.
Right.
Because on all Windows boxes, that's done in hardware. So, and I know that the GP2X can do that in hardware. It's just the people who sold it didn't expose that functionality.
Right.
Which is pretty lame. But
well, everything supposedly has been released. I mean, that was something that everybody was screaming about.
Yeah.
Was, well, they didn't release the source and they didn't release this, and apparently, from what I understand, they've made good on that promise to open everything.
Right.
So I don't know how that's affected your job, or if you've just said, okay, well, the 2X will be on hold until we square away the Daphne 1.0 release, and then we'll go back and readdress it, and hopefully then the development environments will have matured a little bit.
Right.
And you'll be able to go back to it. Now, here's just a strange question. Have you seen Dragon's Lair on the Nintendo DS?
No.
So I'd be curious if what you would think of maybe working on a DS port. Sounds crazy, I know.
That's crazy.
Now, and the only reason I say this is you know that Dragon's Lair got horribly ported to cell phones, right?
I think I heard something about that, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, from what I heard, it's really, really bad. Now, I've seen a codec company who shall also remain nameless. Please don't write to me asking who it is. If you Google, you'll probably find it. But a codec company, to show off their codec, wrote a 4-level playable demo of Dragon's Lair that runs on the Nintendo DS. And I got to tell you, it sends shivers down my spine to be sitting there in my easy chair looking at Dragon's Lair and playing it in my hand. And I'm thinking to myself, if the GP2X, it would obviously, you would have probably problems porting it because nothing that you have would probably run on the DS as is.
Right.
You'd probably have to work. I'm sure what they've got written is not an emulator, it's a simulation. Everything plays right, but, there's always nuances of simulation versus emulation.
Right.
Is that anything that you guys would be interested in? Only because I know that Don and company are interested in promoting Dragon's Lair back into the mainstream. And they've asked me on several occasions about, my thoughts on bringing the property to portables. Because I took my unit over there and showed them some stuff, and they thought that was kind of cool, and they were interested in what I knew about development and that sort of thing. I said, I don't know anything. But I do know what people like, and I did call them and ask them about that. I said, hey, this guy just, shoveled out a Dragon's Lair 4-level playable demo on the DS, and I'm pretty sure he didn't have your permission. He's like, no, they don't have our permission. So it sounds like, obviously, if they let it go to that horrible cell phone port, that they're obviously interested in that. I mean, and this could be something that maybe actually makes you money. I mean, have you ever considered the concept of doing something official for a large-scale commercial project like the DS that maybe you could actually, turn some dollars on?
I have considered it, and my conclusion is that it's probably not a good idea for me to do it.
Not fun. Turn's not fun anymore.
Well, yeah, Daphne has always been something that I've done in my spare time for fun, and it's something that I've been able to do at my own pace. And it would be really difficult to. It gets back into that obligation thing. Like,
sure,
it would be really difficult to try to do that along with having my regular full-time job. and feel that sort of sense of captivity because I'm obligated to do it, and it's turning out more difficult than I thought it was going to be.
Right.
It's almost like it's better to not make money and be
Continue
free
to like it.
to have fun than it is to like make money and resent it.
See, there are a few people in the world that have that kind of outlook. You know, it's interesting. I have a guy at work, and if he ever listens to this, he'll know who I'm talking about. Everything that this guy has to touch or that this guy does has to make him cash. It has to make him bank. And, you know, so he's always looking over at me, and I'm always, you know, chatting like with you or something about, you know, doing the show or whatever. And he's like, so, you know, how much you make on that show? And it's like, nothing. He's like, nothing? You do all that work for nothing? I'm like, yeah, because as soon as I start making money or I have advertisers or the other regular way to make money doing this gig, then I have to answer to somebody.
Right.
I said, I don't want to do that. And he's like, dude, you're kidding me. He says, you could be making tons of cash. I'm like, well, I wouldn't enjoy it then. I wouldn't have the passion or the ability to do the job as well as I do if I felt the obligation to people. And to him,
Right.
that concept is so foreign that, you know, and it's kind of like the whole, you know, open source argument and, you know, how you make money and why would you do things you don't make money on. There are a lot of people that don't get it, that don't. What do you mean you don't want to be rich? Well, dude, if you're just going to give me $1 million for nothing, I'll take it. But I guess I don't want to do what it takes to make $1 million.
Right.
You know, and I don't know. For some reason, I'm sure that you have your own incidences where, you know, people have come to you and said, well, you know, can we do a commercial project? Or are you interested in doing some sort of a, you know, for pay job? And you've turned it away because it sounds like we're kind of floating in the same boat.
Yeah.
With respect to that.
I mean,
I really admire that myself. I've interviewed so many people, you know, like David Crane and you know, these guys, it's like, well, yeah, it's about making money. Well, doesn't it piss you off that they took your Pitfall game and turned it into crap? No, just making money. Did you hear that interview with David Crane?
I think I did, actually.
That just blows me away. I mean, here's this guy that wrote some of my favorite games that I really thought had a passion for, and it turns out
he had a passion for making money.
That concept seems foreign to me. You know, when talking to people like you and the people that you and I, you know, hang around with in our common circles, it's like, what? There's no passion in it for you? You don't care? You don't care that they put your name on something horrible? It doesn't bother you? Well, I got paid. Okay. I don't know. It's interesting philosophy.
With that being said, though, like, I always do appreciate donations. Actually, donations do tend to motivate me. I just like to have them without any obligations attached.
Hence the word donation.
Right. I like people to say, you know, I really appreciate what you've already done, what you've already given me, and so I'm donating for that. I'm not donating for something that you're going to do maybe in the future because that, yeah.
Exactly. And I think when I called for donations for the GP2X project, I think I pretty much said that. It's like, you know, this guy's delivered us a working version of Dragon's Lair, which I never would have thought possible. I mean, I can go into my other room right now, turn on my cabinet on, and I can play Space Ace as it was intended. I mean, right. That's enough for me to throw some bank, you know. I almost bought a Space Ace cabinet for $1,500. I figure, you know, throwing $20 in the kitties, that's I saved $1,480.
Right.
You got to look at it as savings, not you know, accounts receivable versus accounts payable.
Yeah.
So, well, that being said, I know your time's at a premium here, and I appreciate you taking time. And in fact, just so that I can truly appreciate what Matt's done, Matt actually left work and ran home during the middle of a work day just to help work with the schedule with the show. And I personally, I'm really appreciative of that because we both have hectic schedules, it sounds like. And for us to be able to hook up finally, we've been wanting to do this for what, a couple months?
Yeah, I think more than a couple.
Maybe more than a couple months. I mean, we were always talking about something new with Daphne, and you know, people have actually asked me, dude, I haven't heard anything about Dragon's Lair on the show for like 6 months. What's wrong with you? Somehow I always manage to get Dragon's Lair into every episode. So this time I get to do double duty because I'm going to review the high definition Dragon's Lair with this, along with this interview for the September show, which is very exciting. I've been dying to sit down and talk to you about this stuff.
Oh, it's been fun.
It's always good. Always a good time. Shame Brian's not around to put you in those uncomfortable positions like our last interview, which is absolutely gold, people. If you this is a plug for the Retro Gaming Radio CDs, the DVDs. You have to hear the uncut, uncensored version of Matt Ownby's first interview with us. And you can look in the archive to find out when that is. That is radio gold, and it's all thanks to Brien. Poor Matt. That's good stuff, though.
Yeah.
That was good stuff. That was a good CGE, man.
Yep, that was.
I missed out on that. Hopefully we have one next year.
That was like 5 years ago.
I know. That was so long ago.
Yeah.
Believe it? Can you believe both of us have been at this for that long?
It's hard to believe.
It's insane.
It's hard to believe.
Well, Matt, go ahead and give us the website, and go ahead and tell us a little bit. I know you're like almost ready to storm out of here. You did just have a revamp of the website. Why don't you give the website address and tell the folks a little bit about, because I know you wanted to give some props to the developer that did the graphics for you. Yeah,
the website address is www.daphne-emu.com. And the guy who redesigned the website, he goes by the name Lair. I actually don't think he's ever told me what his real name is. So sorry, Lair, if you're listening.
You love the internet.
But he just came out of nowhere and said, here's my donation, a new website. I'm like, oh, sweet.
Oh, and I'm telling you, I'm not a huge fan of things that move on websites. It's kind of one of my, like, kryptonite things. But, dude, when you go to something like this website, daphne-emu.com, and you see watch the banner. I'm telling you, it's cool. I'm not usually down with it, but I thought that was totally stellar. The guy did a great job.
Yep, he did a great job.
Big kudos. Find out if he's got a website or something to promote, or to promote his work or something. We should give him a plug.
Yeah.
Does he have something like that, or a portfolio online or anything?
I don't know, but I can ask him.
That'd be great. I'd like to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, always fun having you. Hopefully it won't be quite as long. Hopefully we can have you here again for the actual launch of Daphne 1.0. I know people are really excited, and I know you're chomping at the bit to get it out. And very exciting times.
Yep.
Very exciting times.
It's good to finally see this day come.
Yes, the day is coming when you can actually put 1.0 on your project.
Yep.
That's exciting for any developer, really.
Yeah.
Especially if you love it.
Yep.
You're not doing it for somebody else. Well, folks, this is you've been listening to the great Matt Ownby right here on Retro Gaming Radio. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us.
Yeah,
or
thanks
joining
for having
me in this case, I guess, right?
Yeah.
This has been fun. This is a lot easier than doing it the last time.
Yeah,
we had microphones stretched halfway here to Kingdom Come, trying to get some of the other guys in on the interview.
Yeah.
Well, Matt, you take good care, and definitely drop in and see us again.
Okay, I will.
Take care. We'd like to thank Matt Ownby from the Daphne emulator for stopping by and giving us a little bit of his time. It's very exciting. I don't know about you guys, but anytime that we can make Dragon's Lair and Space Ace easier access to folks that may not have gotten a chance to play them in the old days, well, that works for me. Once again, a big thanks to Matt, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from Matt again a little later on when Daphne 1.0 actually releases and we get a chance to play with all of its cool features. Well, folks, we have a smaller Bits and Bytes segment this month, but that doesn't mean we don't have some great entries submitted directly from our listeners right through the website at RetroGamingRadio.com. And let's just jump right in, both feet up, and let's find out what we've got on the list. First up is an interesting little item called the Inkspector. It is apparently a Sinclair ZX Spectrum emulator, but it runs as a screensaver, and each of the games that are being displayed inside the emulator can be mapped onto three-dimensional objects or models. So you can make a bunch of TVs flying around that are running Spectrum games on them, or you can create all sorts of other different effects. And apparently it's got its own scripting language. So you can make as many or as few Spectrum screens jumping around. You can make them rotate, spin, flip, or whatever. Now, one, I'm not a Spectrum guy, so unfortunately I can't just get all excited about this, nor do I have any sort of interest in screensavers. So that's kind of a, 2 strikes hit on this one for me. But hey, you know what? I know tons of our UK listeners absolutely adore the Spectrum, and a lot of people still use screensavers. And all the better, you link up the two of them, and you got this. Now, I haven't looked at the scripting language. I can't tell you how complicated that is. But if this sounds like your sort of thing, and it's going to be your thing, or it's not going to be your thing, check it out. One way or the other, it's at least an interesting project. Here's an interesting HelloGamer.com article about the world's crappiest gaming peripherals. And for those who have been around for as long as I have, and some of my listeners have, you've seen some very interesting peripherals come and go. Now, I'm going to let you read the article in full on your own, but I am going to recap the list so it sounds like, if it sounds like something you'd be interested in, then you could take a look. Clocking in at number 10 is the Negcon controller, third-party controller for the PS1 that was available at the time of launch. Developed by Namco as an analog controller for racing games like Ridge Racer. At the time, there was no Sony analog controller like the DualShock, so the Negcon was all there was if you wanted perfect control when racing, and it worked out quite well. The trouble was with this controller is it made you look like a right idiot when using it. You didn't use an analog stick, but instead had to twist the entire controller to steer, which made you look like you were having a seizure or dancing to some music, which I kind of think is funny, and the only reason I talked about this is because that's what you're going to be doing with the Wii controller. It's funny that this item shows up on the world's crappiest gaming peripherals, and yet it's a cornerstone to racing games on the forthcoming Nintendo Wii. Very interesting. Other items making the list, Game Boy camera, the Nintendo Scope, the Jaguar controller. Who can argue with that one? The original Xbox controller, Nintendo Rob, the Fragmaster, Konami's Laser Scope at number 3, U-Force at number 2. I totally remember the U-Force. And finally, the crappiest peripheral ever is the Sega Activator. And they include a video to show why it sucks so much. The Sega Activator was actually a motion sensor, early motion sensor device. And, I never had the opportunity to play one, but I heard lots of very horrible things about it. So, kind of an interesting little article. Everybody has their own opinions, of course, but, there's some of those that are pretty dead on the money. Here's another one of those comical type articles that are pretty funny. This is Ace's generic walkthrough for every game you ever played. This is one of those articles that is probably not exactly work-friendly. It contains a lot of profanity, but in some cases the profanity actually works. This is basically this guy takes you through a very standard-sounding video game and tries to help you through it by giving you some expert advice. Let me just I'll read you the first couple paragraphs. You start in a small room. Outside the door are 2 guards talking with each other. It's best if you completely ignore them because they're voiced by horrible actors and their script is, I'm going to edit, is crap, written by game designers who think they're funny. Usually it's something like, I've been meaning to check out that new T-88 Cloud Hopper. Your gaming experience will be enhanced if you immediately walk out the door and shoot them in their effing faces. They will offer no resistance. At this point, you have to decide if you're going to use a stealth strategy or a run-and-gun strategy. The run-and-gun strategy is a lot more dangerous, but a lot more exciting. You can move through the level more quickly, but only if you're willing to die a bunch of times. The stealth strategy, on the other hand, is much more cautious, tempered approach, taking account of your enemy's awareness levels and using your ears to listen for footsteps and opening doors. Using a stealth strategy is probably the safest way to beat the level, but it'll take you several hours to accomplish this. Which strategy should you employ? Well, let me ask you this. Are you a total effing faggot or what? Pick up your effing gun and start shooting, a-hole. This isn't shoot some effing ladders. All right, that's settled. Now you've shot the 2 guards who didn't even know you were there, so enthralled in their gossip about intrigue in the Dark Mage's court. Now turn to your left and there's a supply closet. Climb up to the top shelf and break open a box. Congratulations, you just got a box of the kind of crappy ammo you never effing use, and which you will end every level maxed out with about 1,000 of them every effing time you play. But you're going to take it anyway, aren't you? And it just kind of goes on like that. Yeah, profound use of profanity, but again, it's a pretty funny read because we've all been in the same exact situation on more than one game, and I thought it was pretty funny. Maybe a little out of taste, but still funny. Up on our truly tasteless web top distractions this episode, this has to go to Kitten Cannon. In this game, you launch a poor little fluffy kitty out of a cannon and try to see how far you can make him go. Think about the long jump in track and field, except for on the sand, instead of there being just sand, there are all sorts of helpful obstacles such as bombs, trampolines, and other things to help propel our feline friend just a little bit further. Now, this is, again, of course, folks, an extremely bad taste, and I don't condone this sort of action with animals. But, you know, in terms of a Flash game, it's actually kind of funny. It's kind of fun, too. But this kind of goes along with the caveman smacking the penguin, you know, hurting small, cute animals for the best possible distance. Well, this game is absolutely no different, and I got to say, I probably spent 15 or 20 minutes launching that poor little cat across the screen. So if you're into torturing small animals, aside from the fact that you should probably see a psychologist, Kitten Cannon may be just what you're looking for. Next up, I've officially added PC World to my list of periodicals that will never grace my coffee table. Just released the top 25 computers, according to this, shall we say, less than now reputable company. Let me just give you an idea. First of all, just so we can get things straight, let me give you a couple of highlights to the list. Number one on their list, the greatest or top greatest PCs of all time, is the Apple II. Okay, now I don't know of how many of you people out there actually got to own an Apple II or used one at school, which is probably more likely. But it would definitely make the list, but would it be number one? Probably not. What's really funny is the Apple makes all sorts of appearances on this list at number 4 with the Apple Macintosh Plus. It also comes in at number 10 with the Apple PowerBook 100. It also comes in at number 19 with the Apple iMac. And then it comes in at number 23 again with the Apple eMate. I don't think that there is another computer manufacturer on this list that gets as many entries into the top 25 as Apple. Makes you kind of wonder, doesn't it? What else would you expect to be on the top 25 computers of all time? Well, let's see. How about the Commodore 64, the single best-selling computer of all time? Let's see. Not on the list. Hello. How do you have the top 25 greatest PCs of all time without having the one that sold and impact? Commodore 64 is a household name. For crying out loud, you can even ask kids today about Commodore 64, and while they may not be able to identify one in a lineup, they've at least heard of it. Have they heard of, let's see, number 9, the Columbia Data Products MPC 1600-1? No. Don't think so. So what else did make the list that you might have, 1, actually heard of, 2, would actually believe belonged on the list? Well, let's pop through the list here. Coming in at number 7, the Commodore Amiga 1000. That wouldn't have been the model I would have picked for the best computers of all time, but at least the Amiga made the top 10. The TRS-80 Model 100, you may or may not have heard of that. The Atari 800 clocked in at number 14. Number 14, the Atari 800, another significant 8-bit computer. Let's see, that's about it. No kidding. Everything else on here are mainframes or versions of the PC. Number 2 on the list is the Compaq Desk Pro 386. Top greatest PCs of all time. And why would that be? Because if I'm not mistaken, the Desk Pro was that horrible little computer. No, that's not the. No, that's a different one. All the same, these are all like 286s, 386s, generic carbon copy computers. I don't know, folks. The top 25 PCs of all time. Let's start with what it should include, because now I'm all pissed off. It should have the Commodore 64. Top 5, if not the number 1 on the slot. It should have the Commodore Amiga. If you really want to talk about what the greatest Amiga of all time was, the Amiga 500. No doubt about it. Okay? Next, on the top greatest computers of all time, right, we have the Atari 800. So at least it made the list, right? But what about the Spectrum, right? If I have to hear one more UK person tell me how great the Spectrum is, I might have to hang myself. And that's cool. It's not on the list. So what are these, the top 25 PCs, the greatest PCs of all time, according to people who grew up writing programs on punch cards? Maybe that's what it is. Because there's a whole bunch of other computers that belong on here. The Trash 80 color computer, the Coco. Come on now. Who hasn't heard of a Coco? Who hasn't used a Coco? You know? Let's see, what other computers might belong on the list? Well, I'm sure we could find a couple more. Let's see, a lot of people would wonder why the Apple II and every other Apple on the planet was put on here other than the 2GS. Right? That was a pretty amazing computer for what it did. What about the Atari S-T? The Atari ST. Now, I didn't own one, but I know a lot about it, and I know that it belongs on this list. So we're talking about a ton of computers missing from this so-called 25 greatest PCs of all time. You know what? I'd like to know. Tell you what, why don't you hop over to the forums and tell me what you think the 25 top greatest PCs of all times are. I'd like to see what reasonable, intelligent people come up with for a top 25 list. Not these morons over at PC World, because obviously they're still stuck like in 1960. Because the greatest PCs on the planet didn't just come out in 1960s, folks. There's other stuff in here to look at, and I don't know. This is a very skewed article. I'm just going to get all uptight if I keep talking about it. So let's move on. In my heart, deep down inside, I have a great love for the Sega Genesis. It was really the first console that I owned, a mainstream console. Well, I guess that's not necessarily true. For those of you who know my console history, after the ColecoVision, I was pretty much out of it. I did get the Sega Master System, which was pretty cool because it had all the great arcade ports, like Outrun and Space Harrier and all that other good stuff. So I did have that, but I only had it for a few months, and I kind of, lost interest. The next console that I got into after that was the Sega Genesis, and for those of you who know the history of that, it was solely to play Mortal Kombat 2, which came out several weeks before the SNES version. I didn't like Nintendo back then anyway, and after Nintendo's blatant regard for censorship and the first Mortal Kombat being completely devoid of blood, I wasn't going to take the chance. Plus, I wanted to play it like now. Because I was part of Generation Gimme back then, apparently. I want it now, Father. Get me an Oompa Loompa now. And so I got my Oompa Loompa, and my friend and I played Mortal Kombat 2 until we couldn't even see straight. And that was cool. So now, how can you relive your Sega Genesis love? Well, we know that there have been tons of Genesis controllers, and there have been a few packs. Well, we get another Sega Genesis pack coming out this time for the PlayStation 2 and unfortunately the PSP. For those who can't wait for the Nintendo Wii's Virtual Console or for Xbox Live Arcade to increase its library, Sega has just announced what's potentially the greatest retro collection ever. The Sega Genesis Collection, with over 30 Sega Genesis titles in one pack. The collection is not only a terrific snapshot of what gaming was 15 years ago, but an opportunity for a whole new generation of gamers to experience the titles that wants to find Sega as one of the game's most revered publishers, blah, blah, blah. So let's talk about what we've got on the list. There's some great titles in here. For a change, it's not like 2 good games and a bunch of crap. We actually have a couple of decent games on here. Included on the decent game list, Sonic the Hedgehog, Shinobi, Phantasy Star, Golden Axe, one of my all-time favorites, Vector Man, Sword of Vermilion, Comic Zone, Alex Kidd, and let's see, Ristar, which is supposed to be the next Sonic the Hedgehog, apparently. And let's see, what other good stuff is there in here? Let's see. Altered Beast. Well, there's of course, did I mention that one already? That's awesome. Columns. That's another great game. Echo the Dolphin. One of my favorite games on the Genesis. Don't ask. Echo Jr. Eternal Champions. Flicky. Another great game. Golden Axe, we mentioned. Golden Axe 2, Golden Axe 3, Phantasy Star 2 and 3 and 4. Yeah, see that they could have done something a little different with that. I mean, what do we need? All 4 Phantasy Stars in here? Let's see. 3 Shinobis, Shadow Dancer, Secret of Shinobi, couple of Sonic the Hedgehog, Super Thunder Blade, Vector Man we already mentioned, Virtua Fighter 2, that's pretty cool. And there'll be 3 unlockable games in the PlayStation 2 version only, including Zaxxon, TaxScan, I love TaxScan, and Zector. So, anyway, that's coming out this fall sometime. Don't have a release date, but that's always fun. I like to see the Genesis getting its due. And it deserves its due because it's good stuff. Many of you know that this show comes courtesy of SpeedHost.com. Now, you've heard me talk about SpeedHost in the past. I love SpeedHost. I love Jose, who runs the place. He's a good friend of mine. We've known each other forever, and we've enjoyed a very great mutual business scenario. A lot of people are like, well, you know, how do you host like all these shows, and how do you have all these big websites that get like, you know, millions of hits a month? Retro Gaming Radio does not get millions of hits a month. I was talking more along the lines of FamilyGuyFiles.com, rest in peace. But SpeedHost has been incredibly generous with Retro Gaming Radio over the years. Better part of a decade, actually. Let's give credit where credit's due. So occasionally, I like to mention some of SpeedHost's other endeavors here on the show because Jose's been just so good to me. Jose is actually working with this other product, which he says is the bomb. And honestly, I'm not going to make any sort of claims on this one because I haven't been involved in it. And it has absolutely nothing to do with classic or retro gaming. In fact, it doesn't have anything to do with gaming at all. Anyway, the product that he's working with is called Mona V, and it's a antioxidant power drink that's supposed to be apparently it's according to Jose and some other people that he's talked to, this is the wonder elixir of this generation. Now again, never taken it, can't tell you anything about it, whether it's good or bad. But I promised Jose that I would mention it on the show because I'd like to see him be successful. The more successful he is, the longer the show gets to stay on the air. So anyway, if that sounds of interest to you, and again, like I said, I don't know anything about it really, but he's got a nice little web page. It's very clean. It's got tons of information about it, and so definitely take a look at that. Again, SpeedHost has been so good to us that every now and then I like to just bring that up. Okay, what's next on the agenda? Here's a video clip of Mario, of course, you know, Mario the plumber from Donkey Kong and, of course, his own legendary series. This is Mario telling some jokes. Yeah, Mario telling some jokes. You're either going to think it's funny or you're not, folks. He does take a couple of jabs at Sony, which is always kind of fun. I think we may have seen this video before or a different segment of it. Anyway, it's cute, especially if you're a Mario fan. If you're not a Sony fan, you'll probably enjoy this quite a bit. I chuckled, so, you know, for whatever good that is. You know, famous people selling their classic hardware seems to be a big business these days. Most of you probably already heard about the Nintendo 64 kid, you know, the kid that was on that video that I plugged a couple months ago. This kid, who's now, of course, considerably older, decided to cash in on his 15 minutes of fame by selling that N64 that he screamed so loudly about at Christmas time. He sold it on eBay. I don't remember how much it fetched, but it was a considerable amount of money. Well, now Nolan Bushnell, the godfather of gaming, the birth of what we know as Chuck E. Cheese and all sorts of other interesting things. Nolan Bushnell put his 7800, his Atari 7800, up for sale on eBay and managed to fetch $1,027 for his Atari 7800. That's really interesting. I would think that people would want to keep significant parts of their history. You know, if I had, I don't know, what would I don't know, if I had a one-of-a-kind special edition retro gaming radio CD, right? Oh, here we go. This is a perfect example. In my collection here, hidden away, I have a copy of that interview with Gary Goldman, the one that I told you that I could never play because of interesting, could be considered libel and slanderous remarks against Disney. Probably all true. That's the problem. Anyway, so let's say that I had that disc, right? And everybody knows about it. It's a famous commodity, at least inside the retro gaming radio world. And nobody's ever going to get to hear it unless, you know, Gary Goldman passes away and his family says it's okay. Whatever. I never plan on airing it. To me, this is like having Half-Life for the Dreamcast. You know, it's a one-of-a-kind sort of thing. You can't get it anywhere else. Now, to me, those are the sort of things that, why would you part with that? I mean, why would I sell that? Ever. I wouldn't. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. But, you know, if you want to sell off what's making you famous, I guess they're not the first people to come up with that. But it just, it kind of disturbs me a little bit that people are willing to part with such a significant piece of their own history, especially like the N64 kit. I mean, if I got famous for some video of me opening a Parker Brothers Merlin, right? I mean, would I sell that? Probably not. But I don't know. Maybe I don't think Nolan Bushnell needs cash. Maybe the N64 kit needed cash. I don't know. Okay, classic video game Monopoly. Now, this is kind of cool. And you know how, like, every show, I've got somebody that, like, takes a Game Boy and turns into a web server, and or somebody that takes a Nintendo remote controller and, turns it into something else. Anyway, we talk a lot about that sort of thing, and it's like, you know, people have got to have something better to do with their time. Well, this guy went through and created a complete Monopoly game. And there's tons of pictures. There's a complete Monopoly game here based on classic gaming. And this is pretty cool. They even have pictures of he and his family playing it. It contains, let me see if I can get you some representation here. You can click the link and see for yourself, but you have everything represented here. 2600, NES, Commodore 64, arcades, all sorts of things in here. Everything is kind of, represented. I think this is really cool. I'd love to see something like this mass produced. Of course, you're never going to see it mass produced because guess what? You're never going to be able to get the licensing rights for all this graphics, all this artwork. The best you can do with something like this, folks, is make one of your own, which unfortunately I'm incredibly lazy. I'll never do it. But you know what? That's cool. I mean, to me, that's a cool use of your time. This is something you can actually, use? I don't know. And he's right. It's classic video game Monopoly, and it makes regular old Monopoly look like trash. So that pretty much sums it up. This is something that I'm kind of on the fence about. I think it's cool, but is it exploitation? I don't know. There are 2,600 plug-and-play keychains. This is really cool. Follow me on this one, and you're going to get to see a link. They're $15. Tell me this is not the perfect gag gift, the perfect stocking stuffer, the perfect holiday treat for the classic gamer. I'll read the description. In the olden days of gaming when quarters were a hot commodity and color graphics were the newest innovation, one name stood out as king, Atari. The games were visually simple but retained their hold as some of the most challenging and fun games ever created. Sadly, it's just too difficult to carry around an Atari system in a bag of cartridges and controllers, both joystick and paddle, wherever you go. So we found a pocket-sized solution. Each keychain has a secret. They contain real games. Plug in the included 6-foot cable on a battery-powered reel into the keychain and your TV, and you can enjoy the games of yesteryear. You read that right. These keychains contain real Atari games that are fully playable. Joystick 1 has Asteroids and Millipede. Joystick 2, Centipede and Yard's Revenge. And the paddle has Pong, Breakout, and Warlords. Each keychain comes with a separate pocket-sized reel that holds 6 feet of cord and RCA jacks powered by 3 AAA batteries not included, single player only. And they look cool. They look just like their little 2600 counterparts. So that's pretty cool. They're $15. Now, the only problem, of course, here is the fact that aside from Yard's Revenge, there's probably nothing on any of the 3 of these that I'd actually want to play. And what's the point of them being pocket-sized if you have to carry around another reel filled with cabling and batteries and all that good stuff? I don't know. I'm kind of on the I keep thinking to myself, I'm going to order a couple of these because these are really cool, give them away as Christmas presents. But I don't know. I mean, nobody I know would actually play Millipede on the 2600. Or maybe Centipede, but Centipede has never been any fun with a joystick. Anyway, cool stuff. I mean, it's cool idea. Again, execution might have been in question. Okay, so what do we got next here? We have a Coin-Op TV interview with Eugene Jarvis, which is funny. I can't seem to get Eugene Jarvis to return a single one of my communications. The man makes the greatest game of all time, Robotron, and I can't get him to sit down with me and give me an interview. Anyway, I haven't got a chance to watch this yet. It's on my queue of things to do. But, Coin-Op TV has a pretty good history of putting together some good stuff. And, of course, Eugene Jarvis is just like Don Bluth to me. I'm sure I could just sit here and listen to him. He could read the phone book, and I would be completely captivated. Eugene Jarvis, of course, responsible for the great Williams games like Robotron, as previously mentioned, Defender, Smash TV, and, of course, one of his latest creations, Target Terror, which is one of my absolute favorite gun games at the arcade. I'm praying that we get to see Target Terror appear on the Nintendo Wii, because that's one of my favorite gun games ever. Anyway, Eugene Jarvis should be a good interview. Here's another one of those mods that you have to ask yourself, why? Ben Heck, the guy behind doing all of those cool portables. You know, the guy that made a portable 2600 way back when, before we had Nintendo on a chip or NES on a chip, and all of these other great contraptions he's put together. He's made handheld Sega Genesises. Yeah, that'll work. He made handheld Genesis. He made handheld NES. I mean, he's done all of these sort of things, and now he's taken his biggest jump ever. He made an Xbox 360 into a laptop. He actually had to have a special water-cooled system. Now, I could really give a rat's ass if there's a PlayStation, or an Xbox 360 that's portable. I don't even want one that's not portable. However, you got to admire the guy's dedication to doing these sort of mods. That's pretty cool. Anyway, so check it out. There's some interesting stories about what he had to do, of course, as always, to get this guy to work inside this mod case. Check it out. You'll probably be impressed whether you like Xbox, Microsoft, or not. Oh, man, there's more than I thought. How about that? Next up, name that game. Match the game with the sound effects. Now, does this sound like more fun than it should be, or what? The game is definitely more centered towards classic arcade gaming. Those of you who are hot shots in that area will have no problem with this quiz. I got 17 out of 18. I missed the Zelda sound effect. Not a big surprise since I didn't really play Zelda on the NES. So there you have it. Anyway, it's kind of fun. It's a nice little distraction. Again, it'd be really cool if, it catered more towards a global audience. But hey, who cares? It's classic gaming. It's awesome. Suck it up because it's cool. Okay, next up, The Escapist. Yes, as always, The Escapist always produces top quality work. This time, the Epic Yard Sale Tale. As you might have guessed by the title, it's about finding classic gaming goodness at the yard sale. And, you know, it's kind of funny, but I used to do a lot of yard sailing. It used to be kind of one of our things, my family's things. We like to get up really early on Saturday and go trekking around looking for those great deals. Because it used to be, in the old school days, that yard sales were actually the top-notch place. Because nobody had a clue what anything was worth, or two, how to properly price anything. So you could literally walk into a yard sale and for $1.25 walk away with a complete Atari 2600 system with a handful of cartridges, probably one of them falling into a high rarity value. You know, something that you don't see every day. I'm sure that most of the greatest transactions of all time were done via the yard sale. Anyway, he claims to have caught all sorts of different items, such as the collector's edition of Legend of Zelda, amongst other things. This is sort of a story time deal where he talks about the different locations that he went to and what he found or what he just missed because somebody in front of him had it. This actually even talks about dumpster diving, you know, being the neighborhood scrounge and digging through the garbage can and finding a Nintendo Virtual Boy. Couldn't think of a better place for the Nintendo Virtual Boy. At the end of the article, he talks about some of the great things that he found. I'll run down a couple of them before you go take a look at the article. A Sega Dreamcast with 2 controllers for $20, an NES light gun for 50 cents, 3 Mario dolls from Wendy's, the 2004 Kids Meal Toy Collection, a 1986 Super Mario Brothers doll, an Intech PS2 game console LCD screen for $75, Rygar for the PS2 for $250, and Super Mario Kart for the NES for $3. So, anyway, as always, The Escapist is a never-ending provider of absolutely fantastic reading. Once again, this month, no different at all. Okay. Yeah, I haven't been yard sailing forever. That just made me think about some of the things I actually did manage to come across at a yard sale. Let me think about that for a minute. Did I ever pick up anything really super cool? I did replace my Merlin. The Merlin that ended up getting crushed in a box because I didn't properly package it up. I put it in a box, not its box, around nice, non-crushing styrofoam, but rather I just threw it in a box, which is something you never do with classic games because no matter how hard you play it and they never break, for some reason, the second you don't care about it and you put it in a box, that's the time it gets crushed. Yeah. So in any event, I had to replace my Merlin, and I actually did find one at a yard sale. I think I picked it up for $1. Now, this isn't that nasty new Merlin, folks. That's not that horrible, nasty new one, the one that you get at Target for $12. It's a little tiny one. It's smaller, and it actually talks. You turn it on, it's like, "Welcome to Merlin." It plays all this music and crap. It's like, dude, that's not Merlin. That's some bastardized whatever. That's the ultimate in name whoring. And I don't know. I didn't want to start here talking about the Merlin. For those of you who are big Commodore 64 collectors, for those of you who are into Commodore 64 emulation, some of the best things about the Commodore 64 are impossible, for the most part, have been impossible to experience, even with an emulator. Because most emulators, for the most part, have emulated discs or tapes, which is the medium of delivery on the Commodore 64. Now, a lot of people, including myself, had enhancement cartridges. Things like the Action Replay cartridge, the Final cartridge. What else is there? There's tons of enhancement. Fastload, Epic's Fastload. Everybody remembers Fastload. Well, these are the sort of things like Epic's Fastload. Do you really need them when the emulators load the games instantly? Well, you don't need it to play the games, but these sort of things are experiences all upon their own. The action replay, being able to be in the middle of a game and just pushing a button on the back of this cartridge and freezing the game and dumping it to a disc. Of course, save states are like totally commonplace now. So it's not that big of a deal. If you've got any good emulator like Vice has save states. So there's no reason to use an action replay unless you're in it for the nostalgia. Now, on this website, probably totally illegally, this guy has collected absolutely tons of cartridges, including some really weird odd ones, like the C64 diagnostic cartridges. Some of the enhancements, like the fast loads, the final cartridge, the programming languages, right, like Hessmon, for programming an assembler, or Forth. A lot of these cartridges were used to deliver programming things. What else is there? Let me poke through this list here a little bit and see what else hops up. Super Snapshot, that was another capture cartridge. And of course, with no cartridge collection on the Commodore 64 would be complete without an endless supply of games. Many games were cracked down from cartridge or dumped, much like piracy on consoles and handhelds happens today. But things like Attack of the Mutant Camels, Decathlon, Donkey Kong, Gateway to Abshai, one of my absolute favorite games, Ms. Pac-Man. There's just tons of them. A lot of these things I didn't even know existed on cartridge because I had cracks of them on disc. But these are important nostalgic piece of the Commodore 64 experience. And who knows how long this site will stay up. The compliments of this show, someone will probably, give the guy a cease and desist or something, which would be really sad. But, hey, it's technically illegal to be sending this stuff out. But if you're into the Commodore 64 like I am, I would recommend going while the site's still up. I don't condone piracy. For archival, backup, nostalgia purposes only, grab a copy of all of these things because you're not going to find an action replay cartridge. I mean, I still own a Commodore 64. It's not set up. I don't have room for that. But if I had a 64 set up, I would want an action replay in it. And unfortunately, I'm never going to be able to find an action replay cartridge for my Commodore 64. So this is the next best thing to remembering the nostalgia that was a huge part of Commodore 64 life. Everybody had an action, or didn't have an action replay, but everybody had at least a fast load cartridge. For anybody who had a Commodore 64, you know what the disk drive was like. It was like waiting for, it was like waiting for a sandwich to be made. I mean, Beachhead 2 on tape. Literally, when the screen came up, please wait 22.5 minutes for the game to load. Damn, that is a long load time. Anyway, so the action replay cartridge and its ilk were huge things on the Commodore 64. Yes, I've droned on enough about that. Retro Remakes competition, the 2006 competition for at remakes.org. The entries are over as of the end of August. They were taking no more entries. I would keep an eye on this page, though, because in December they're going to announce the winners, and you'll be able to download all of the retro remakes. The purpose of this, they're sort of their mission statement. They're looking for good remakes of good games that anyone can play regardless of their ability. So that's kind of what they're, basing their judging on. There are tons of sponsors, Puppy Games. Remember them? Whatever happened to Puppy Games? I forgot all about those guys. Retro Blast, X Arcade, Retro Gamer Magazine, Click Team, and tons of other folks are donating prizes, cash, all sorts of stuff for this retro remake competition. Again, it's too late for you to get in on the programming action, but that doesn't mean come the 1st of December, or which I believe is when they're talking about releasing all of the code and releasing the winners' names, doesn't mean that you can't grab a hold and ride that kite, because that's going to be some good stuff. It always is. Every year these guys have some really good submissions, and I think you're going to love it. As our list continues to wear down, Quest Studios is about music, in particular computer adventure gaming music. This is pretty cool. I mean, I played a lot of adventure games on the old computers, not on consoles, but on the computers. And these guys have compiled a list of all of this stuff. Music from things that you'd totally forgotten about, right? Gabriel Knight, Heart of China, King's Quest I, right? Of course, everyone's heard that one. But they have MIDIs, they have enhanced MIDIs, digital soundtracks. They've got tons of stuff. Things for like the Roland. You remember the old Roland Sound Canvas GS? You know, all of these things. There's the PC. When I say PC, I'm talking about IBM compatible Wintel boxes. I'm not talking about Commodore 64s, Atari STs, whatever. The poor bastards that got into early PC gaming really had rough lives. That's because, remember IRQ conflicts? Remember the old days where you couldn't run both sound and voice synthesis and sound effects because your interrupt wasn't set right or whatever? I also remember the people who moved to PCs instead of going to Amiga like I did also had to play the sound card game. Remember that? You had your Creative Sound Blaster 16. That was the golden gem. But not everybody could afford a real Creative Lab Sound Blaster 16. So you got crap like the Mozart Sound System or the Disney, what was the Disney one called? I talked about it on another show. You had all of these different sound cards. Some had wavetable MIDI support, non-wavetable MIDI support, X number of voices, X amount of memory on board. My God, that was just to get sound to come out of damn speakers on your computer. Give me my Amiga. Let me put a stereo RCA patch cable between my Amiga and the stereo, and let me listen to Ghostbusters on Sonics, because that owned. Let me listen to the intro to Defender of the Crown booming out of my stereo. I felt sorry for the people who had to deal with old PC gaming. But for those of you, again, nostalgia is king, nostalgia is beauty, and for those of you who probably grew up in that era or had the pleasure, of dealing with multiple sound systems, multiple sound cards, MIDI out, wavetable synthesis, yada, 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 and of course you happen to like Sierra Classic Games, then you're going to definitely want to check this out because they have some pretty cool stuff. A retrospective on Sonic the Hedgehog. Can you believe Sonic the Hedgehog is 15 years old? 15 years old. I have a lot of trouble wrapping my hands around that. 15 years since Sonic was born. Here's an article at IGN.com. Time Warp Sonic turns 15. As Sega celebrates Sonic birthday, IGN looks back at Sonic's wild games and guises. So if you want to take a walk down memory lane about Sonic the comic book, Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic the 3D game, everything about Sonic, here you go. This is your article. You know, I really enjoyed the original Sonic the Hedgehog. I really did. But I kind of lost interest in Sonic. I mean, even the DS version, which is a brilliant piece of programming, the game is kind of like, I've been here. Okay, he runs really fast, there's a bunch of rings. Oh, lost all my rings, go pick up my rings. Run really, really fast, do a loop, lost all my rings. That's kind of Sonic in a nutshell, right? I thought there were better platformers out there. So, I don't know. But anyway, Sonic deserves mad props because, like, half of platforming stole fizzy lifting drinks from Sonic the Hedgehog. They deserve a little cred. Okay, my favorite, Madden 07. Man, have you ever seen a bigger onslaught of advertising and promotion for a video game series? I mean, you couldn't turn the TV on, walk into a computer or video game store and not see like a massive push. I mean, Madden 07, Madden 07, Madden 07. I mean, it was insane. I actually went out and grabbed Madden 07 for the DS because it's actually kind of cool. You know, there's a time for a while in every franchise's life where there are significant increases from year to year, right? For those of you who are DS aficionados, you've probably played Madden 05, Madden 06, and Madden 07. Now, I don't fall into the gotta have it every year sort of thing because I don't care about team rosters. It could be, Joe Montana or it could be Bob Smith. I wouldn't care. I don't have a favorite team that I have to whore about and worry about. So I don't really care so much that EA owns NFL because it could be, green pigskin football and have absolutely no licensed characters, no licensed teams, no licensed names, and I could be totally happy playing a game of football like that. I find it truly stunning. Okay, 07 is decent on the DS. I haven't played it for anything else. It's a nice increase from 05 because I didn't buy 06 because I don't buy stuff every year just to get the new teams. But 07, I got a chance to take a peek at, and it's kind of cool. You can call audibles with the microphone. They've definitely cleaned up the engine. There's less goofy crap going on. So at this point in time, 07 was kind of a worthwhile upgrade. It wasn't just a team roster with a couple of bug fixes. They actually improved the game. And now that EA has suddenly jumped behind the DS bandwagon, now everybody's developing for the DS. We're closing down half of our PSP division, and we are opening up. My favorite quote was from, VP of Marketing. It's my tagline on the forum. I'm sure you've seen it. We were excited when PSP technology came out, but then the customers told us what they really want is fun. So EA has suddenly got this new barb up their butt to become the fun gaming company. So what were you trying to do before? That's what I want to know. In any event, EA manages to pocket a lot of bank. Compliments of Madden 07. $100 million. And you can't see, but I'm putting my little finger up to my mouth. Madden scores a $100 million hit. It's crazy. They released it just before football season. Very smart. They had a media blitz campaign, and it is insane the amount of platforms this thing's available for. And it's coming out on the Wii, where you'll actually be able to pass the ball with the remote. Now, okay, I might end up going for that. I am interested in playing games that offer me something different. Now, if I can't get different games, if I have to live with sequel after sequel after sequel after sequel and knockoff after knockoff and name whoring after name whoring, the least you can do is give me a different mechanism to play it with. The concept of being able to throw my own ball, the concept of being able to sword fight with the Wiimote, all of those things are attractive to me. And Madden 07 could actually be able to provide me an interesting new football experience on the Wii. So, is it worth $100 million? I don't know, but ever since Madden bought up that franchise, the NFL franchise, they're making some good bank. Not sure I totally like that, but what can we do? Okay, what's next on the list here? War Wound. War Wound is a forthcoming Windows PC game for one player, and it's got a demo. This is, for the lack of a better term, it's a three-dimensional cannon fodder. Do you remember Cannon Fodder? Possibly one of the great games of our generation. You run around with like a little three-man team, using the mouse in a pretty intuitive way. You controlled this little band of guys, you ran them around different environments, and you just waxed these other little soldiers. The best part, of course, was the fact that you could keep shooting them after they were dead, and they would keep jumping around. There's nothing more fun than shooting a soldier, preferably an enemy soldier, and shooting him again and again and again and making him scream. It's just like Impossible Mission, folks. How many people actually finished Impossible Mission? Show of hands, that's what I thought. No. Most people never finished Cannon Fodder. Hell, I don't think I got past like level 10. But there's nothing more gratifying than powering that guy up, running around, walking through the water, shooting guys, and listening to him scream. So I have not played the demo. There is a demo version available that allows you to run through a couple of levels. No release date, nothing like that. But War Wound looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. It looks exactly like Cannon Fodder to me, folks. It's 3Dized, and apparently you're going to be able to do some things like climb, pilot vehicles, things like that. So it looks like fun. It looks like fun. It looks like my kind of game. I wanted to make sure I gave it a good plug. And, of course, I'll give you a link to it. I'll tell you, I can never get enough Cannon Fodder. They also relate it to Syndicate. The guy that submitted it also related it to Syndicate. And I wasn't a huge Syndicate fan, but, Cannon Fodder, bring it on. Yeah. So anyway, Cannon Fodder for the PC basically is what we're talking about. Graphics look good. So the people who can't seem to live with a game that doesn't look like it was made today, then there you go. Our next story, I'm going to give you fair warning right now. Do not click on the link to take you to this story. If you're at work, if your wife happens to be around and has problems with you looking at anything that might possibly induce any sort of nudity or sexual reaction from you. Because here we have a look at the 10 naughtiest games of all time. And I'm poking through this list here, and I'll give you the list. The true value in this list is actually reading the comments. Lots of profanity. There's nudity on this site. So, again, if this is the sort of thing that bothers you or somebody nearby you or in the cube across from you, I don't want to hear anything about sexual harassment suits. So let's talk about the top 10 naughtiest games of all time. Miss World Nude 96. Which looks to be like one of those standard. Do you remember how many games came out that were basically kicks but had like nudie pictures behind them? I think there was so much of that. It was simply insane. But anyway, here are like 5 different chicks you can get naked by drawing over them and filling up the screen. Number 2, Bongo Ga Bongo. Bonga. Is this this is an arcade game? Interesting. This is Japanese game. Let me see here. I didn't see this one when I poked through this to preview it. Anyway, take a look at that. Custer's Revenge, of course, on the 2600. Always naughty, always fun. Beat 'em and eat 'em, of course, on the 2600. Cho Iniki. That sounds like another Japanese game. And I don't think I want to even look at that one. Gigolo. No, looks like a 2600 game. Not bad. Has a little sex scene in it. The Yakukan Special. You play rock, paper, scissors, it looks like, to get little Asian girls naked. I guess that's got possibilities. Burning Desire. Looks like that might have been, 2600. I was going to say it looks like it might have been on the Spectrum. Naughty. Strip Fighter 2. Hey, that's got potential too. And, of course, Bubble Bath Babes, rounding out the list. Pretty good stuff. 10 naughtiest games of all time. Man, I tell you what, people send me some of the funniest stuff. This time I didn't get a single, I'm kind of disappointed. I'm kind of disappointed that I didn't get a single Korean advertisement for, tourist stuff. That's what I've been getting a ton of that stuff lately, is tourist advertisements. Come to Korea. Come and enjoy Korea. I don't know. Atari Remembered, another IGN article. Industry types and IGN editors share their fond memories of the OG of gaming. What the hell's the OG? Anyway, these guys talk about some of their favorite games. These are new guys. Like, for example, David Jaffe, the game designer for God of War, mentions that one of his favorite games was Adventure. The CEO of id Software, Todd Hollinshead, no T in there. Haunted House was one of his favorite games. Missile Command. There's some good stuff in here where people talk about, there's like 4 pages. People talk about how E.T. single-heartedly created the video game Crash, that sort of thing. Good stuff. A look into the death and rebirth of the coin-op industry, another IGN article sent to us called Arcade Evolution. They talk about the history of coin-op, why people played coin-op games, what caused them to fail, and what may be in the future. So, Give me mocap boxing, and I'll be good. All right, we're starting to wear down our list here. We have one video that was nuked off YouTube because Adam Entertainment said it was used without permission. Worst video ever. Okay, next up, home of the Twisted Films Game Over, which is apparently what we were sent here for, is offline. So if you're interested in seeing the Game Over film, and let me see if I can find, this is a video game classic animation, or classic video using stop motion animation, includes original arcade sounds. If anybody's managed to snag a copy of that before it went offline, I'd love to have a copy of it, so let me know. PS. What is PES? What does that stand for? Anyway, so you can get some other short films that he's made there, but the Game Over video, unfortunately, for the person who submitted, I'm sorry, it's offline. Can't help you. Okay, let's see what I've got else left on the list. Yes, we've been through the naughty top 10. Oh boy. Let's see here. Destructoid. Video games. Let's see, what do we got here? Another dead link. All right. Well, it's always easy to talk about links that are dead. Here is an article called Confessions of a Rebel, Self-Contained Universe. This is an article commenting and contrasting about single play versus multiplay. This, of course, is an argument that is near and dear to my heart because, as you know, I'm not a multiplayer kind of guy, typically, especially not the hordes of multiplayer first-person shooter games, which seem to, basically come to my door faster than the roving Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons who are trying to convert me from my hedonism religion. However, this guy actually, again, sometimes I swear to God people listen to my show, even though I know I don't have that big of an audience. Here we go. Let me see if I can give you a quote here that totally... Multiplayer games, on the other hand, generally rely on many things, not the least of which is the company who made it still existing and operating servers. I have no doubts as to whether you'll be able to relive your favorite multiplayer games 10 or 20 years from now. The word multiplayer has become synonymous with disposal. Standard multiplayer games don't bother me at all, since most are designed with a thoughtful single-player component. I can simply play that and ignore the rest. But the things that caused my initial amusement at the trend to change to horror was the massively multiplayer game. The thought that anyone would want to experience a virtual world with non-virtual people was foreign to me, and when these games became popular, it seemed like the entire world was flocking toward them exclusively. I began to realize that the average gamer was no longer a lot like me. And this goes on and on. It's very insightful, well written, good stuff. I recommend it, especially if you feel the way I am, that there's far too much concern given with the multiplayer aspect, which is so funny. People. I actually, if you read Slashdot, the gaming area of Slashdot, there is an article about what was it that I commented on? Social networking. If you really want to know my thoughts on the whole social networking thing, I'm not going to delve into them here, but I wrote a big long thing for Slashdot on that. So you can take a look at that. I think there's a link to it in the forums as well if you don't want to go digging through Slashdot, and I can't blame you. GamePro TV episode, an old school episode, GamePro TV episode 1, the Magneto edition. Anyway, this is on YouTube, so you better race over there real quick before they pull it. And this is a little video show they put together. I haven't had a chance to really watch it, but I did want to bring it to your attention. Sounds pretty cool. Another article here on Hideo Kojima's legacy, the influence of him the last 20 years in gaming. He announced during the May's Konami E3 press conference that this year, 2006, marks his 20th anniversary in the games industry. Since his start at Konami in 1986, he's produced and directed some of the game industry's most influential titles, Metal Gear, of course, being one of the huge ones. He talks more about it, the original Metal Gear 2, etc., etc. There's 4 pages of this. If you're a huge Metal Gear fan or a Hideo fan, you'll probably want to get in on this. Metal Gear was never my gig, but I know to a lot of you it was, and I want to make sure you guys get hooked up. Well, heck, actually, I managed to pull a full hour out of that with a lot of stammering and him hawing around between articles, right? Anyway, please, this bit of the show, this segment, is largely due to you, the listener, finding cool stuff that I would have never seen and sending it to me via the contact form on RetroGamingRadio.com. So please, if you find something interesting, please let us know, fill out the form, and hopefully we'll get it here on the show. So that's going to wrap up this edition of Bits and Bytes. Tune in next month when we talk about the greatest pieces of information scattered amongst the net, brought to you right here on Retro Gaming Radio. Brien King from ArcadeRestoration.com, the author of Cart Commander, a great collection utility to help you catalog your favorite cartridge game-based systems. He's dropped by to give us a little information on what's happening over at ArcadeRestoration.com. A lot of people seem to express some interest in arcade game collecting again. And, of course, you don't always get a brand new, crisp working machine when you go out buying stuff. How do you put it back together? How do you fix that crazy monitor? Brien King, a.k.a. Arcade Nut from the forums, is here. He's going to talk to us a little bit about arcade restoration. Now joining us here live on our virtual studio is Brien King. You may know him as Arcade Nut from our forums. Welcome, Brien, to the Retro Gaming Radio Show.
Thank you for having me.
Not that you've never been here before.
Shane who?
Yeah, exactly. What show was this again?
You guys talk about the PSP, right?
That's right, yeah. We're big PSP Xbox fans. No. Brien is going to start a new little segment here on the show. We're going to give it a test out and see what you guys think. A lot of people seem to be getting into buying and refurbishing cabinets, or they're interested in, making a main cabinet, that sort of thing. And Brien is Mr. Arcade Restoration. He runs ArcadeRestoration.com. How long have you had that site open? Like 10 years?
It's pretty close. I think 2,900 days or something like that.
Nice. So it's a long time.
Yeah.
And you've worked on just about every different possible arcade cabinet out there, haven't you, at some point or another?
Mostly raster. I haven't really done anything with the vectors.
So you haven't had to restore a Tempest machine?
No, but I do have a Tempest.
Yeah, I thought that thing broke down a lot, Tempest did. You haven't had to work on that?
That's what I've heard, but so far I've been pretty lucky.
You've been lucky. That's cool.
Yeah, the monitor on it, the 6100, has been known to have a lot of problems, but there are several kits out there for beefing them up.
So what we'd like to do is the first segment here, Brien and I are just going to do a little interview style and talk about some of the things that as a future arcade restorative artist that you might need to know. Also talk to you a little bit about who Brien is and what his credentials are, so to speak, although you can probably see a lot of that on his website at ArcadeRestoration.com. A lot of people don't realize what it takes to get some of these old units working. I mean, some of these have been sitting out in the rain. Some of them have been sitting inside of a smoky tavern for 20 years, and things are just nasty. What sort of things does a person need? Tools and skills does a person need to get one of these old arcade cabinets? Maybe buy it off of eBay, partially working, or picking it up out of some operator's lot. What does somebody need to get into arcade restoration?
I mean, a lot of it depends on the condition. Like you said, like I just picked up a Donkey Kong Jr. The cabinet is very, very solid. It's got side art that's probably like 99% there, maybe even a little higher than 99%. But the monitor needed a cap kit. The marquee was a inkjet printout taped to a piece of cardboard that had what I hope was water damage, and not like a cat peeing on it or something.
Nice.
So I had to get a replacement marquee for that. So the locks are gone, so they use what's called an operator key, which is basically a screw into the back door that screws it into the cabinet.
Operator key.
Yeah. So, say, hand me the operator key, it's usually an electric screwdriver.
Nice.
Phillips screwdrivers, flathead screwdrivers, needle nose pliers, dikes, not the lesbians.
Isn't there like a politically correct term like, what do they call it? Cross cutters or something like that?
I don't know. I call them dikes.
That dikes is funny though. Dikes is a lot more funny than
That's right.
cross cutters.
You know how politically correct I am.
Yeah, you know how politically correct this show is too, so we're in good company.
That's right.
Okay, so you need some dikes.
Those are the main things to work on the majority of stuff. Once you start getting into like monitor repair and PCB repair, then you're going to need a soldering iron, obviously. Highly recommend the Wellers. The Wellers are great soldering irons. Stay away from the Radio Shack crap.
Yeah, know all about that.
Once you get into the heavy duty restoration stuff, like some of my Robotrons where they're completely painted black, they've been sitting outside for half a year, they've been converted to some piece of crap JAMA game, you're going to need things like a skill saw, a jigsaw, I have a belt sander and a hand finishing sander. I've also got a table saw, need a drill. A good crescent wrench helps for a lot of stuff too. There's actually a page on my website that lists a lot of these tools as well.
Well, there you go. That's a good thing. And now, can anybody get into this sort of thing? I mean, as soon as you start mentioning skill saw, that kind of puts me out of the loop. But when you start getting into the internals, I mean, how often do the internals need to be monkey with the monitors, the PCBs, the boards, rather?
Well, you figure a lot of these games are 20 to 27 years old. So, and a lot of the times the monitors and stuff haven't even been touched. So that more than likely that they're going to need a cap kit.
Now, what exactly is a cap kit? You hear that a lot on restoration forums. What is that?
A cap kit is basically it's a packaged deal that like Bob Roberts sells, where it has all the capacitors, sometimes transistors and stuff that you want to replace on the monitor's motherboard, because those will fail over time, and then your picture will get darker, your picture will be collapsed, or you'll see a little bit of a curl, or the picture will be shifted or shrunken. So you buy one of these kits that has all the different capacitors, and you replace them all on the motherboard, and then the picture looks like you just bought the game brand new.
Nice. And what does something like that cost? So let's say that I'm at some Eats a Pizza or something, and they've got like a Ms. Pac-Man for sale. It's like $500, and the screen's kind of twitchy. What would it cost me to restore that screen?
Cap kit's about $7.
About $7.
$7 to $10, yeah, depending on which monitor it is.
And what will you need to do to replace a cap, to do the cap kit?
You have to have a lot of bravery.
Can't you get like electrocuted from doing that sort of thing? Get a nice big jolt? Well,
the monitor holds a charge of 19,000 volts, and you have to discharge that monitor. And I have a screwdriver that's 2 feet long with a big alligator clip on it that I clip onto the frame of the monitor, and then I stick the blade of the screwdriver underneath the suction cup, and you get this loud pop. That's 19,000 volts going right to ground.
Nice. Nice. So $7, a little risk, and you've got a nice looking Ms. Pac. Nice.
Right. And I've got a photo tutorial on my website for doing cap kits.
Well, there you go.
And there's also a link to another site that talks about cap kits.
So other than so that's probably like the most common thing you do when you do a restoration?
That and probably replacing the power supply. Power supplies typically go bad in these things.
And that's not something you like go down to Fry's Electronics and pick up, right? You've got to get something special for that?
No, you can use a PC power supply.
Oh, you can?
Yeah. You just have to cut the ends of the connectors off and wire it. Most video games are going to take, I should say most video games will take +5, +12 But there are certain games out there that take some really wacky voltages, like Qbert needs plus 32.
Where do you pick up something like that?
You don't.
Nice.
The plus 32 is used for the knocker.
Right.
You know, when he jumps off the side and he hits the ground. Well, there's actually a solenoid in there that hits a piece of wood, so you get that knock noise.
So if you had a Qbert that doesn't make the knock noise anymore, and it's the power supply, you're pretty much SOL, or?
Well, you can find another solenoid that'll run off of like 12 volts.
Oh, I see.
Like with take for example, the Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. and Popeye and all those. The Nintendo power supply has plus 24 volts, which runs the coin counter. Well, if you don't care if the coin counter runs or not, then you can replace it with a switching power supply. For me, I don't care if the coin counter runs.
Gotcha.
Same now with like the Williams games. There's a couple problems with this, putting a switching power supply in there. One, you don't get the coin door lights, but you can run those off of 12 volt. You just have to wire it up by hand, and then the game has a problem with retaining the settings because the linear power supply, the plus 5 and the plus 12, come up at different rates. With the switching power supply, they come up at the same time. So that kind of freaks out the board occasionally, and you'll lose your high scores and sometimes your settings.
So and how many games have that sort of a scenario? Not too many?
Well, all the Williams games. Like Zookeeper and a lot of the Tato games will have that. In fact, I just picked up a conversion kit for Zookeeper that I'm restoring that has a little board on it that has some components to correct that issue.
Interesting. So what other common issues do you find with doing this restorations?
Dirty as hell.
A lot of cleaning involved. And is there anything special you got to do? I mean, obviously there's a bunch of electronics in there and wires and all that crap.
What I typically do is I'll pull everything out of the game.
Yeah.
And then I'll take it outside and run the garden hose through it.
You'll run water inside the cabinet?
Yep. Well, we're in Arizona. It takes about 30 seconds for it to dry.
Right. But you wouldn't but that's like wood in there, right? That's like plywood.
Yeah, I have a picture of my Joust restoration where you can see like 2 or 3 inches of the water in the bottom of the cabinet. And it's just black.
And that doesn't hurt the wood or anything? Or?
Well, it would if you let it soak for forever, but if you just, sit there and wash it out and then, rinse it out and then take the wet and dry back and suck all the water out and then let it dry, it's fine. Most of the wood is hard enough and sealed so that it's not going to absorb a lot of water because it's so old.
Right.
Now, I wouldn't do that with a particle board game, such as a lot of the Atari games or Pengo or that type, because with the particle board, it's like a sponge.
Right.
What happens is it soaks up all that water, and then the board will expand, and then when it dries, it becomes very, very brittle. And the only thing that you can do is cut out that chunk that's swelled up and replace it. So water damage is the worst kind of damage you can deal with.
And how often does the water damage the insides?
Like the circuit boards and stuff?
Yeah, monitor, circuit board, power supply.
You could get corrosion. That's probably the biggest thing. One of the biggest killers of boards, actually, is battery acid corrosion. Because a lot of the games, like the Nintendo games and the Tato games, have, and actually the Williams games, too, have batteries on them. Actually, the early Nintendo games didn't. It was the Versus System ones that had the batteries.
And that's what, to retain scores, or what?
What's that?
To retain scores?
Right, to retain scores and settings and that type of thing. And what happens is, over time, if you don't change those batteries, they'll start to leak acid onto the board, and that acid will eat up the traces on the board. and therefore your game will fail, and it becomes very difficult to repair.
So for people, I assume when you talk about repairing boards like this, you'd have to have some special skill set to actually work on these boards. Is that right?
A lot of patience,
Yeah.
a good multimeter, and a lot of help from the internet.
Useful. Now, let's say that you're one of these casual type collectors, right? And here's a game that you've been dying for, and the cabinet is absolutely cherry. It looks like it's been sitting in a nice, clean warehouse, but the board's just dead. What are these sort of boards? Are these available? I mean, how would you if you didn't want to get into multimetering and doing all the voltage checks and all that goofy stuff, and you just wanted to swap the board out, hoping that was the problem? Can you get those boards, or?
Yeah, it depends on the game. If it's something super rare, like a Quantum, then you're probably not going to find a replacement board for it. But if it's like a Williams game or a Nintendo game or something like that, there's boards all over the place that you can find, or you can send the board off to somebody to repair it. If you can't repair it, somebody else can.
Gotcha. And, well, I mean, obviously, depending on the game and the rarity and the popularity and stuff like that, the prices vary. But what does a run-of-the-mill board cost to replace?
Well, you can go all the way to the low end, which is about $25, and that's usually for something like Rastan, which there's about 1 billion of and nobody really likes. I'm sure somebody's going to complain about that, right?
Oh, yeah.
All the way up to, like, Major Havocs lately have been going in the neighborhood of $300.
Wow. That's just for the board.
Just the board. And that's, some of that, that's like $250 to $300 for untested.
Wow.
Tested, you might spend a little more.
And where do you shop for things like this?
Walmart. No.
Yeah, Walmart's got them.
Actually, Walmart had a crappy, those Midway, what were those things?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, yeah.
They were just total junk.
Yeah, well, they were $499. That's why they were junk.
Yeah, but I sent you that picture of the root beer tapper.
Yeah.
I paid less than $4.99 for that.
Yeah, but it doesn't have, 30 games in it.
No. But it's a hell of a lot nicer.
Speaking of which, a lot of people have a real personal thing with side art, and that seems to be one of the hardest commodities to come up with, is finding side art to replace damaged ones. In fact, you hear stories about people buying really crappy machines just so they can get the panels that have the side art on it.
Yep.
What's the take on that? Why is that stuff so hard to get when you can get boards fairly easily?
Well, boards come out of games, and they're easy. You throw them in a box and you stick them on a shelf. You can't rip the side off of a game and put it on a shelf.
True.
And typically they don't make. I mean, you can trash. A lot of the cabinets get trashed, so they have all these parts, or a lot of these games were converted to something else. Like there, thousands upon thousands of games, were converted to Rastan and that type of thing. So you got all those boards and parts and stuff that they took out of those games, and they're just sitting on some operator's shelf someplace. Whereas the side art, it's been painted over.
Right. And are there sources of reproduction art that you can get a hold of? I mean, obviously there's legal things behind that, but I'm sure people are doing it anyway.
There's a place here in Phoenix called Phoenix Arcade. Then there's Arcade Shop, Fabulous Fantasies, a place like tmolding.com for your T-molding. And I know I'm forgetting several others, but there's quite a few out there. And I probably have links to all of them on my website.
Yes.
I can't pronounce one of them. It's like Ozalic or something like that. He does really good stuff.
And I'm assuming that, what about things like control panels? Now, a lot of the control panels are real generic, but there are many of them that are very detailed in terms of button placements and actual graphics and all that sort of thing. How hard is that sort of thing to find and replace?
Not very difficult, because a lot of operators will take the control panels out and build new ones. Because like for the Nintendos, it's just a piece of wood with a couple holes drilled in it. But like for the Williams games, the operators and stuff, when they convert these games, they drill it full of holes. So something like a Robotron,
right,
where it has two joysticks, and they'll drill like 4 or 5 holes for like Mortal Kombat. So what you have to do is either build a new control panel or fill in all the holes.
And how do you handle getting the artwork back over those holes, or you just don't?
Well, you can get reproduction overlays.
Oh, okay.
Reproduction side art. In fact, I've got several sets of reproduction side art for many different games.
Cool. What does something like that run? You wanted to throw on some Mario Brothers side art, or I'm assuming it varies, of course, depending on the game and whatnot. But
a lot of it depends on that. Like I picked up a couple sets of Donkey Kong Jr. side art for $25 a piece.
Well, that's not bad.
Whereas some of the side art cost you, $200-$300.
Wow. What's something that costs a lot of money?
Tron.
Oh, I bet.
Because Tron is the full side of the game, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a lot of it. If it's not full, it's
right.
a lot.
There's a Gauntlet side art out there, which is pretty big. Centipede is the entire side of the game.
Wow.
But again, it depends on how long it's been out there too.
Sure.
When it first comes out, it's going to be expensive, and when they have stuff sitting on their shelves and they want to get rid of it, then it goes down in price a little bit.
Things like I remember one of my stories I told long ago on Retro Gaming Radio is when I broke a piece of Pac-Man glass, and that had like all the stuff painted on it. How do you replace something like that? Your kids you get it and there's no glass, or kid smashes it or whatever.
You post a message on RGVAC. It's rec.video.games.arcade.collecting. The news group. And you say, I want to buy this. And then, or you look on eBay. And then hope somebody has one.
So you couldn't buy the stuff that goes on the glass. You'd actually buy the whole glass?
Yep.
Wow.
Well, I mean, the artwork was... Well, a lot of the artwork was silk screened on.
Gotcha.
But people do make reproduction stuff. Like my Hubert is the original is a glass, but all the artwork is peeling off of it, so it looks horrible. So I bought for $25, I think it was, a reproduction front glass that's plexi. Now, obviously, it doesn't make the game as worth as much as if I had an original piece in there.
Right.
But it sure looks a hell of a lot better.
And would you say you restore for personal use, right? For the most part.
Yes.
You're not looking to restore something and then sell it, turn a profit, that sort of thing.
No way.
Is there money to be made out there doing that?
Sure, but it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I bet.
And the price of arcade games have fallen quite a bit. Probably 6 months to a year ago, you could have gotten double what you could get now for games.
Wow, and what do you attribute that to?
Saturation of the market. That, in the beginning, it was more of, oh, cool, let's get an arcade game, and then, it's almost like a fad, right?
Sure.
With anything new in collecting, it's a fad at first, and then all the people that were just doing it to do it, those guys fall off to the side, and the people that are really interested in collecting, the core collectors, are the ones that are left around, remaining. It's probably the same thing with anything, right?
Sure. Anything that comes and goes like that.
Right. You're going to get the hardcore collectors, who are the people that have been collecting for years and years, and will ride out the little ups and downs of it.
What is the hardest thing? What is the hardest piece or board or most complicated thing you've ever had to acquire to restore one of your cabs?
Zookeeper PCBs.
Really?
Yep.
Just not a lot of them, or not a lot of
very,
demand,
very,
or?
very, very hard to find. Zookeeper was not made. There weren't very many Zookeepers made compared to the rest of the games, and the Zookeeper boards have a tendency to fail a lot.
Yeah.
So finding a working set is even more challenging.
And failing to the point where they can't be repaired?
Not necessarily not repaired, but constantly repaired.
Ah.
But in a home environment, it shouldn't be that bad.
Well, you would hope so.
Well, they're not. The games aren't going to be running 24/7. You're not going to have a lot of people beating on the game.
Not moved around a lot.
Yeah, not moved around. Probably better quality power.
And what sort of price did that rare, hard to get object run you?
The boards were $160.
Wow. And there's more than one board. Is that what you're implying, or you bought more?
Yeah,
than
there's. What is it? 4 boards?
Wow, and they were 150 apiece?
No.
Oh, no.
Ooh, for the set.
Ah, gotcha.
Which is actually a bargain for that board set.
Really?
Because they're so hard to come by. I probably would have paid $250 for them.
Well, too bad for the guy that you bought them off of. Too bad he doesn't listen to the show.
He might.
He might. So you're looking at restoring that. So you're looking to restore Zookeeper, which is one of my all-time favorite games. Which means I'm going to have to come and break it in with you.
Yeah, I'm expecting Shane to be visiting often.
I will be visiting to play Zookeeper, especially with a real
No, dear,
joystick.
I got to go out for more milk and bread.
Got to go get milk and bread. It'll be about an hour.
Yeah.
Nice.
Luckily, you don't live that far.
That's true. We're pretty close. So, what sort of advice would you give somebody who's interested in doing arcade restoration?
Don't do it.
Don't do it. It's a lot of work, is what you're saying.
Well, no, I mean, don't get into arcade collecting.
Bad habit, costs you a lot of money, take
a
lot of space.
Let's see, in 1998, I started out with one lonely little Defender. Now it's got 29 companions.
That's a lot of games.
Yeah.
Fortunately, you're
house
not
is
married.
overflowing.
That's why you still have 29 games. I had 4 games, and I am down to 2, plus the pinball.
Yeah.
One of them's just a main cabinet.
And pinball takes up a lot of room.
Yeah, it's sharing my movie nook with my movies right now, actually.
Yep.
Works out pretty well. Looks pretty cool in there, actually.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to just get started in collecting and restoring, my site's definitely a good spot to go to first. And there's tons and tons of links. In fact, there's 93 links to different places. Then go to the news groups, groups.google.com, do searches. There's a web link, the web ring at the bottom of my site. Follow that and just read lots and lots and lots of stuff.
So would you be willing to field questions from our listener base if they have something specific? And
sure.
They could write you in. And what email can they send that out to that you'd be interested
Well, why don't we do it? Why don't we have them send it to the show, and then you can ask the questions on an interview type thing.
Well, that sounds good. We can do that. That sounds like a winner. So great. Well, that's sort of an introduction to our arcade restoration piece. We'll run it for a few shows, and we'll see what you guys think. If there's no interest, of course, then obviously it's sort of pointless to run through the hoops. But if you guys are finding it interesting, I know that the hardware segment's getting some good press. So this seems like a logical add-on to go along with that. And Brien, as always, fun to have you on the show. And
appreciate it.
Not a problem. And I'll be looking forward to coming over and breaking that Zookeeper in with you.
I got to unbreak it first.
Yeah, unbreak it first, and then we'll break it back in.
That's right.
That sounds good. Well, do send your arcade restoration questions. Go to RetroGamingRadio.com, hit the Contact Us link, and type in your question, and I'll make sure Brien gets it and We'll check it out, and we'll answer your questions right here on the show. Sounds like a good time.
Excellent.
Thanks a lot, Brien. Take care.
Bye.
We'd like to thank Brien King from ArcadeRestoration.com for stopping in and talking with us. Remember, you can ask Brien King a question via the Retro Gaming Radio website at www.retrogamingradio.com. Go to the Contact Us, leave us a message for Brien, and we'll have him on the show to answer your questions about arcade restoration. Thanks again, Brien. And now for the brand new segment, the Hardware Flashback, featuring Subaru Brat. This month we got a great little segment for you. I'm just going to let him take it away.
Thank you, and welcome to the Hardware Flashback. Last broadcast, we went over the process of attending an arcade game auction, and I mentioned that this broadcast we were going to do a follow-on and discuss how to pick the best game for collection. We're going to have to defer that by just one broadcast so that we can cover a topic about current production of classic gaming hardware. I never wanted to see a lot of things go out of production. I never wanted to see a Commodore 64 go out of production. I never wanted to see an Atari 2600 go out of production. And if you're like me, you felt a sense of loss. I would have liked to have seen those things remain in production. I would like to walk into Kmart and buy a brand new production 2600 today. Well, the good news is, in some cases, you can. And not all of these devices are in the format that you might think they would be in. The reason I want to get this show out to you a little bit out of sequence here is some of these devices are about to disappear from the store shelves, and I wanted you to be able to have this information while it would still be of some use to you. The four things we're going to be talking about in this broadcast of Retro Gaming Radio are the Atari Flashback 2, the Commodore 64, NOAX, and GOAX. We'll start off with the Flashback 2. Now, the Atari Flashback 2 is a so-called plug-and-play console that's really like no other in appearance, in function, or design. This was designed by a fellow named Kurt Vandell, who is an engineer that did a lot of outsourced work for Atari. And this one was done right. If you remember the Jack-specific joysticks of the Atari Flashback 1, they were not done right. They were all Nintendo on-a-chip emulations or simulations of Atari games. And that's where the term NOAC comes from, Nintendo on a chip. Now, the Flashback 1 was horrible. If you bought this thing like I did, and you went to play a game like Asteroids or Solaris, and you went to fire the cannon, and instead of hearing this guttural roar, you were greeted with sort of a high-pitched, tinny cartoon sound, which is fine when you're playing Mario, which is a nice cartoon, but not so fine when you're out to destroy asteroids that are going to smash the Earth. Now, the Flashback 2 was something that I think most of the hardcore folks know what's out there, but a lot of you on the periphery might not know exactly how significant this unit is. Let me just bring you up to speed on it. It is, in fact, original Atari hardware in a unique package. What they did is they took the major chipsets, the 6502 processor, the Stella Graphics chip, and they put all these chips on a single chip, etched the dies, did a lot of the connections and logic on the chips, and they produced that Atari on a chip, something that had been kicked around and discussed in the past. But they really did it, and they did it right. In fact, there's an interesting story behind fixing it. I'll get to that in a moment. Now, this unit, just to describe it, it comes in a very attractive box, somewhat retro. I would say it looks a little bit reminiscent of the Atari 7800 box. And it really is a nice unit. It's about a 1/2 scale Atari 2600. Instead of slider switches, they have round momentary press buttons. But the essential shape is preserved, and preserved well. It really does look incredibly nice. It comes with 2 high-quality joysticks. Now, these joysticks are essentially reproductions of the original Atari joysticks, with, I think, some small modifications that make them better than the originals. This unit is about $30 off the shelf, and when it was in the on eBay back before this unit came out, you would see new-in-the-box Atari joysticks going for significant amounts of money. And it was really hard to find a really nice one. You could rebuild them to function well, but the orange paint around the tips of the dots and all would be faded. And these joysticks, when you open the box, you will just be blown away. Now, unlike the Flashback 1 joysticks, these joysticks are actually plug-and-play compatible with 2600, Commodore 64, Genesis, any of the gaming devices that use that DB9 connector with the standard pinout. It is worth, even if you hate the idea of the Flashback 2, and you are a 2600 purist, buy this thing just for the 2 joysticks. You will not regret the purchase. Now, the games that come in this thing are unlike most of the built-in games. If you ever notice, they tend to repeat about the same 7 to 12 classics over and over, and these guys really broke the mold with this thing. Not only do they have the classics you would expect to have, Jungle Hunt, Missile Command, Asteroids, all the standards are there. They reached out to the homebrew community, and they have submissions from people like Dennis DeBrow, Keith Erickson, Joe Grand, Ron Lloyd, Tony Wong. If you frequent Atari Age, these names will stand out to you. These are guys that are still developing and publishing and selling games for the 2600 today. They are continuing production of that software. This unit is just amazing. You take it out of the box, you hook it up, you have a blast. But it doesn't stop there. There's something that this unit will do for you that really other ones won't do. It has got the ability to add in a cartridge slot so you can play original 2600 games on this device. It doesn't come with a cartridge slot, but when Kurt designed this thing, he designed it deliberately to be hacked. Printed on the device, on the silk screen onto the circuit board, are pinouts of the data lines going to the cartridge. A1, A2, what have you, ground, VCC. And all you do is order up the parts, which we'll give you in a minute, and add the cartridge slot. So you can plug in cartridges and play them on this thing because it is true 2600 hardware. In fact, the proof of this is that there are 3 different hardware revisions on this unit. Now, in the first one, there were some games that weren't fully functional. There were a few compatibility issues. These are not emulation issues. What happened is the design was sent over to the overseas office for production. And the engineers went through and saw a few errors and mistakes, and they fixed these errors and mistakes and put the hardware into production. The problem is those errors and mistakes were inherent to the 2600, and the programmers had exploited those tricks to get results. And now those results didn't work in some of the games anymore. So following with the second revision, they put the mistakes back in, if you will, and everything was fine. And now the games work quite well. And one last note before we get into the real meat of this hardware is that there are some neat hidden games in this thing. They really did intend for this to be a true 2600 unit. The menu has a feature where if you enter 1972, and that would be up 1, down 9, up 7, down 2, what will happen is another menu will be revealed to you in which some paddle games are accessible. These games include Super Breakout and Warlords. Now, once you've explored the unit and you're ready to modify it, what you want to do is you want to order up a cartridge guide, a 7800 connector, and a ribbon cable, and then go to Radio Shack and get yourself a small, maybe 3-inch by 3-inch printed circuit board. You solder the connector to the board, glue the board to the base of the game, run the ribbon cable from the connector, and solder it to the points on the circuit board. And what this is going to let you do is cut a hole in the top of the deck of the unit, put this cartridge guide in that hole, glue it from the back, and now you have a nice, neat cartridge slot that looks just like it did on a 2600, 7800. You plug your cartridge in. You can do like I did and put a small micro switch at the base of that cartridge guide so that when the cartridge is plugged in, it disconnects the onboard ROM and enables the cartridge. This way you can snap in your cartridge and play it. It really does work. It takes all the wear and tear off your original 2600, and it's one heck of a neat feature to know that there is a true Atari 2600 out there on the market today. Now, the reason we wanted to go ahead and move this show up, jump ahead of the arcade segment, is because this unit is now out of production. The last shipment went out in late June and is on the shelves now. If you want to pick one up, now's the time to go do it. When the holiday season hits, I imagine the last of them that are in stock are going to sell out pretty darn quick, and you want to get your hands on one. Speaking of other hardware that's about to disappear quick and be out of production, there's another neat little device. Now, this is a game that Radio Shack sells, and its catalog number is 60-2739. Remember that when you go into your local Radio Shack so they can find it for you. If they don't have one in the store, compel them to do a district search, and they can find out if there are any in neighboring stores. They can also order them in from other stores without a shipping cost to you. So make sure that you drive it home that you want one. What this is, it's a Hummer racing game, and it's a deplorable game. You plug it into it's a plug and play of the worst kind. You plug it into your TV, you got this little steering wheel, you turn around on a race course, you can select a mud bog. The graphics are horrible, the colors are horrible, the whole unit is horrible. However, hidden inside of this terrible game is, I think, one of the most wonderful pieces of hardware to be in production today. It is a Commodore 64 on a chip. I'm sure you all have heard of the Commodore 64 DTV joystick, which came out in the US and in Europe. And this is in that same family. It's actually the same circuit board. It's just inside this ridiculous looking Hummer dashboard with a steering wheel. If you recall back on Retro Gaming Radio some time ago, Shane interviewed a lady named Jerry Ellsworth that dealt with the production of the Commodore 64 DTV. This is that same piece of hardware. However, it's got some enhancements and a few limitations you need to be aware of. Well, let's talk about the Commodore 64 DTV in general. It came out in three revisions. There is version 1, which was sold in the U.S. It has 128K of RAM, no flash memory. That's important to remember. But it has both joystick ports accessible. You can use this thing as a Commodore 64, fully functional in most respects. Now, the second version that came out was sold in Europe only. It has 2 megabytes of RAM, and it does have onboard flash. What this means is that you can do an entire load, including the OS. You can load up games, anything that will fit within this 2 meg of flash, which, if you understand Commodore 64 games being 8K, 16K, 64K, that's a lot of good games. Now, in version 2, this flash is accessible. You can load applications to it, like I said. Also, joystick ports 1 and 2 are accessible. The drawback is this version was only sold in Europe, and it only comes in PAL, which is their version of television broadcast over there. If you hook it up here, it won't work. It can be converted to U.S. standards if you can find one. However, the Hummer version already comes ready with NTSC, which is our standard television, 2 megabytes of flash memory, giving you plenty of room to load applications on it, and that's just with the onboard memory. The only drawback to this thing is that you are not going to have both joysticks accessible. You're going to have to choose games that are keyboard playable. Some games are only joystick playable. Fortunately, there are tons of ones that are keyboard playable. This will work. Now, before I get into the nuts and bolts of how to convert it, I'm going to tell you what I did with it. I went down to the local computer store, and I picked out this really nice translucent blue converter that lets you put a laptop hard drive into this external box, plug it up with a USB port or SCSI or whatever you desire. What I did is I used the 5-volt power supply built into the unit. I used that to power the Commodore 64 DTV board. I used it to power a circuit board that lets me use a compact flash card. I have a 512 megabyte in it, and that gives me a lot of hard drive for a Commodore 64. I also have the output ports to hook up to a 1541 disk drive. I have the ability to hook up to a printer. And on board the DTV, you've got a standard PS2 keyboard signal array. You solder this to a PS2 connector. You plug in a standard PS2 keyboard, and that's your keyboard. No special stuff required. Couldn't be easier. The beauty is I've got this really exotic-looking Commodore 64 hooked up to a printer, a monitor, a 1541 floppy. It's got a 512 megabyte hard drive in it and a modem. And I've got this thing hooked up on the internet through the Ethernet adapter. It is just incredible. It's something you truly have to experience. Here's how you do it. Get down to Radio Shack and get this thing. It is out of production. However, there are still quite a few stores that have them, but once they're gone, they're gone. Once you get your unit home, you're going to need to order some items. You're going to need a PS2 adapter. You're going to need a whatever port you want to interface with the Commodore 64 disk drive. You're going to need some RCA females and using the schematics that are out there. And when you look in the links section for this month's Retro Gaming Radio broadcast, you're going to see a special section for the hardware flashback. And in those links, I'll give you the locations to get all the parts you need from. Once you get everything soldered up and the unit is operable, you're going to need to get a couple additional items. You're going to need to get a Commodore 1541 floppy drive. You're going to need to get a Commodore 64 XM 1541 cable. Now, you can find these on eBay. I'm going to give you a seller for about $15. What you do is you hook up the 1541 cable to your PC, hook that up to the 1541 floppy, and at that point you can control the floppy drive from your PC. This is great stuff. You can download any of the Commodore 64 disk images that are out there and make floppies from them. In this case, you're going to get a program that will let you flash the onboard flash device with a Commodore 64 kernel and a file system that's set up and designed just for this Commodore 64 device. Once you've written your floppy, you hook the drive up to the Commodore 64 you've built, run this application, reflash the flash, which will load the Commodore 64 kernel, a great selection of games, and you can build whatever selection of games you want into this thing. And you, at that point, are running your own Commodore 64 you've built. This thing is so small and slim, you can stuff it into the bottom of the very PS2 keyboard you're using to control it, as well as a compact flash card, adapter ports for your modem, for your floppy disk drive, whatever you want to do. This is one fantastic little unit. The caveat to this fantasticness is, remember I was telling you how that game didn't look so good? Well, they got cheap at the factory and decided to save some money. There are 4 330 ohm resistors and 3 680 ohm resistors on board this thing that are spec'd to the wrong value. And this sabotages the video. The color saturation on it is horrible. You'll notice that when you power up the unit with the Hummer game. The easy thing is, this can be fixed. Using some tweezers and a 15-watt grounded soldering iron, you can desolder the incorrect value resistors, solder in the correct value resistors, and the color will look fantastic. For the sound, one of the oscillators on the SID is at a lower level than the other two. This is the drum oscillator, well, the one that's assigned the drum operations, and it will impact a lot of games. You desolder this one set of resistors, solder in some new ones, and bye-bye audio problems. And I got to tell you, there's nothing so satisfying as going down to the store, buying a $10 PS2 keyboard, a $15 piece of crap Hummer steering game, and a couple hours later having a fully functional Commodore 64 that you can play all your great games on. It is just incredible. Again, out of production, still in the stores. Get it while it's available. The final two items we're going to talk about have been out for a long time now and are so, well, at least one of them is so prolific you wouldn't believe it. I have seen this used even in the display for a stereo amplifier. NOAC, Nintendo on a chip. The NES is alive and well, and probably more than any other classic console, in the form of this all-in-one chip. There are a number of units out there that exploit this chip, most of them gray market or pirate. The one I want you to really check out is one at PowerPlayerUSA.com. Again, check the link section for the hardware flashback and the Retro Gaming Radio link section for this broadcast. And you will find that this unit is about $18. There's a fancier unit that has wireless and is available, I think, for about $40. Both units include a light gun. And there's a pretty good selection of games on these things. You've got Super Mario, Pac-Man, Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, Galaga, Donkey Kong, Paperboy. All your major Nintendo classics are there. They're not paying licensing on these, so they can stuff on whatever they want. Now, when you open up the unit, you'll immediately see that it's very hackable. One of them is in the form of a Nintendo 64 controller. The other one is in the form of your classic DualShock controller. On the bottom of the controller, there is a broad connector that is the same pinout as the NES. Also, the Famicom. This will play Famicom games. This is true of virtually any NOAC-based unit. If you go on eBay and do a search for top loader NES, you'll see a lot of these units for about $15, and they're all NOAC-based. So this is pretty much true of any of them. One of the interesting Nintendo units out there is the Hip Gear screen pad. It has a built-in screen that's fully compatible, and you can take this whole unit and condense it down into a very small unit that will snap onto the top of a Nintendo cartridge. Ben Heck did something similar to this. You can build your own. It's not difficult. This is actual, Nintendo hardware on a chip that is still in production. The NES has never really gone out of production in that respect. I'm going to give you some good links where you can explore how to exploit this hardware. And it is so prolific. If you haven't heard of it, a simple search will give you a ton of sites telling you how to do whatever you want to do with this thing. An interesting side note is that another company, PlayMessiah.com, they've been interviewed on Retro Gaming Radio in the past, built a new production Nintendo-style unit that has some compatibility issues. Rather than using the proven Nintendo on a chip, they went off on their own, and the unit, to be honest, doesn't work that well. It looks really nice, it just doesn't work that well. Now, that said, there is a product that Play Messiah sells called Deoxit that if you own older games, you need to get. There is nothing better on the market for cleaning up the edge connectors on these games. Fantastic stuff. Now for our last topic of the broadcast, GOAC. This stands for Genesis on a Chip. What has been done here is there's a company called Radica that is making a Sega Genesis on a single chip. It's very similar in concept to the NOAC. The unit that Radica has utilized this GOAC chip in roughly resembles a 1/4 scale Sega Genesis unit, and it comes with an attached controller that is roughly reminiscent of the first generation Sega Genesis controller. What you want to do is cut away the portion that includes their ROM chip, and using a pinout diagram, which is going to be in the links section, you will connect it pin by pin to a Sega Genesis cartridge connector. At that point, you could stuff this thing into a very small case, maybe about the size of a pack of cigarettes, that you could snap onto a Sega Genesis cartridge and play on a TV. If you want to include a small monitor, there's tons of small NTSC-compatible monitors out there, be it a pocket TV, a specialized LCD, whatever you want. You can make a very small Nomad-like device with much lower power requirements that will let you play your Sega Genesis games on the go. The one caveat to this unit is that the included controller seems to be the only one that really works well with the unit. If you attempt to splice over line for line an original Sega Genesis controller, it just doesn't work. That said, with minimal effort, you could transfer over the electronics from their provided controller into the case of an original Sega Genesis controller, giving you what you want, including the DB9 connector where you could have a removable controller. And that pretty much sums up the GOAC chip. Even with emulation being what it is today, and I have a GP2X, I love emulation, I just think it's one hell of a testament to the genius of the original design that 20, 30 years later, you can walk into a store and buy off the shelf, maybe in a strange form, the original hardware concept that these guys came up with. To be able to go in and buy essentially a new production 2600. As much as we did feel that sense of loss when these devices went out of production, disappeared from the store shelves, in some cases they're back. And the guys who did this, hats off to them. One heck of a show. And speaking of shows, next broadcast we're going to follow up, as I intended, covering the process of selecting arcade machines for restoration and some of the details that go into that. Coming up on the broadcast following that one, we're going to have a neat special on multi-carts. These blank cartridges that are available for tons of systems that let you load up games from ROM files, maybe a 5200, Vectrex, where you can get every game ever officially released for it on one cartridge. The Odyssey 2, where maybe those games are a little harder to find off the shelf than some of the other classic gaming systems. We're going to get into that. I think you'll really enjoy that. And I know it's a ways out, but you're not going to want to miss the Commodore 64 Christmas special that we're going to do here on Hardware Flashback. We're going to go into this from two different angles. We're going to talk about finding and restoring a Commodore 64 in the original oval case with a data set, maybe a printer, good stuff. And then we're going to go into building the ultimate Commodore 64 with, say, a 2 gig SCSI hard drive, 20 meg of RAM, a 20 megahertz processor, all based around the original Commodore 64 core. It'll run all the original software and do a lot more for you. I think you're going to really enjoy that. Thank you for joining us for this broadcast of Hardware Flashback on the Retro Gaming Radio Show.
Well, folks, that's going to wrap it up for the September 2006 edition of Retro Gaming Radio. Next month, we will return our regular segment, the GP2X segment, catch up with all the homebrew and good stuff that's going on with that quirky little Korean handheld. Of course, we're going to have some brand new, fresh interviews from the last Classic Gaming Expo. We'll also have news about Classic Gaming Expo 2007. All sorts of good stuff coming up for you next month on Retro Gaming Radio, as well as a couple of other little surprises. Yeah, can't go into detail. We'll see how it pans out. Anyway, special thanks goes out to speedhost.com. Jose, our benefactor over there, hooking us up with bandwidth and space to give you the show. And thanks to all of our listeners. We've had a lot of new listeners show up on our gaming forums at MonroeWorld.com. The forums there are packed full of great quality people. We have a great community over there, and many more people are actually starting to show up. And we really appreciate the fact that people are willing to not lurk and kick into the conversations and get some dialogue going. It's really important for the whole Retro Gaming Radio community. Well, this is Shane R. Monroe for Retro Gaming Radio saying, until next time, keep it retro.